Cale, should we start with our usual "Are we live" commentary?
Yep, I'm checking. I'm
I think we are.
checking. We do happen to be live. We have some people in the chat. What's happening, everybody? All right, we got the Pinpals. The Pinpals are back. My name's Cale. We have our friend Serge here, and we have a very special guest, Mr. Josh Sharpe. Somewhat special guest.
Yeah, a guest. We'll go with a guest.
Thank you for joining us, Josh. What are we going to get into today, Serge? A little Pulp Fiction action.
Let's do it. Yes. Hello, Pinpals fans, and welcome Josh to the show. Josh does so many things in pinball. And today, this show is not about all of those many things. It's not a podcast about his role as head of the IFPA. It's not about his background as a longtime elite competitive pinball player. It's not about his famous pinball family or his other work at Raw Thrills. No, this episode is about his approach to rules design on a beloved game, what I will argue is a masterpiece of a game, and that is Pulp Fiction. So, welcome to the show, Josh.
It is on Raw Thrills time, though, however.
They approve.
Don't tell my bosses who are next door.
Deal. Awesome. So on this show, we like to cover all games on their launch day with coverage of their layout and the rules, even when it's early on code. But we also do much deeper dives, like we're doing today, on games when they reach feature completion. And that is what we're doing today. First, let's give some credit to the team that worked on this game. Josh, I put this together. Anyone that I'm missing that you'd want to add?
No, that looks like it was a small ragtag group for sure.
And you got something amazing done too. So I must.
Fiorentino co-design. I don't. Depends on where you want to throw them. But yes, yeah, that's the group.
Okay, awesome. And I must spoil something I'd say for our viewers here, which is on the show when we do deep dives of code, I don't hold back my opinion on things I like and I don't like. But the spoiler here is that Pulp Fiction code is great. And Josh, I wouldn't have asked you to come on the show if I had a lot of bad things to say about it. That would be way too uncomfortable.
It wouldn't have. You know what? It doesn't bother me one bit. I'm happy to. I'm happy to handle those opinions and explain my. There's plenty of people that I know don't like certain things about Pulp, and I'm happy to spar with them on why we made the decisions we did.
Oh, well, let's see if we can bring those up today, too. But the rules in this game, I feel, are awesome. And my hope today, though, is that we objectively prove why those rules are awesome, along with you, Josh.
Good luck.
All right, so as I mentioned before, I think this game is a masterpiece, but I'm not alone in that opinion. Currently on Pinside, it is ranked as the top-rated ever single-level game of all time. And that's a way to think about it.
Add that to the marketing materials right now for CGC for another run.
Exactly. There'll be games like Godzilla and Harry Potter and Jaws, but if you really look at the list, there's only one that makes even the top 75 on Pinside top games of all time. That's a single level game. So it is the only single level game in the rankings of like literally the top 75 on Pinside, which I think, considering especially that the vast majority of pinball games of all time in the last 100 years have been single level games. I estimated, for what it's worth, 82% of all pinball games in the last 100 years have been single level. And that is, if you look at IPDB, they have like over 6,000 games that they catalog. So that's where I'm kind of pulling that data from. But anyway, that's an incredible feat. So Josh, I wanted to ask you, how the hell did you and the team pull it off? How did you make a single level game that was actually embraced by the community, a modern audience?
Good question. I mean, we took our time. When you have like 81 years to make a game, I think it really kind of speaks to the culture we have at Raw Thrills in general, in which, this project fell on that. We're fortunate for pinball to not be a hobby of ours, but we are kind of this boutique pinball outfit with a behemoth of a Stern-sized arcade game manufacturing company behind it. That, I mean, we might be the only pinball developer that it isn't their sole business. So for us, there's kind of no pressure to get on the line until we believe we have something that's special. And we use a lot of that time to get through a lot of really bad stuff that doesn't see the light of day. So I do kind of, the culture around here is probably the most important part in that game getting to where it needed to get to. And really, joking about Quentin Tarantino, but and I've heard Gomez talk about this over the years, but when you're pushed into very tight design constraints, it's like the opposite of we can do whatever we want, which ends up being sort of way harder to execute on. I think when you are pushed against a corner and you have these really strict boundaries on where you can and can't go, that's the challenge of the problem solving of how do we make this work with no display? How do we make this work with no ramps? And, physically, Mark, it's single level, but we have balls that go, it's 3 levels in our mind. How do we make a single level game that because Quentin doesn't want multiple levels? And Mark's like, I can kind of add this top level behind the backpack. You see the ball goes up. Hopefully he doesn't hate that, but then it disappears. So it's not like sitting high and then all the stuff that's, in the pawn shop underneath. So it's sort of the same thing. So yeah, I don't know. And I think just follow, like, you look up Mark's design history and he does good shit. He just does. And, I know for him, the 25-year break, for better or worse, I've used to joke that, like, my dream job was working in the pinball industry and pretty much doing my job for a pinball company. And I have exceeded that with my actual job. And I think Mark kind of fought that too, of like, he could have jumped and designed for anyone at any time, but our situation here at Raw and Play Mechanics is so special. It kind of transcends the personal wants to make pinball. So his ability to sort of, release whatever pent up stuff he hasn't done in a quarter of a century. I think we were all just focused on, like, we didn't know if this was going to be a one and done thing, or if we so we really had no expectations of this needing to further the business. So we just did some shit that we thought was cool. And the baseline of what, I think what Mark thinks is cool hits a pretty wide demo of people that, like, that'll probably be fun for a pretty wide audience. So let's just keep moving forward.
Hey, Josh, how long was the development cycle for this game? And was COVID a blessing or a curse?
It was a blessing. I think it started, I think they were a year in before I even figured out what was going on over there. Because I'm at Raw, but back then I'm at Raw 5 days a week. Now I get to be on the pinball side 1 day a week. But back then, I didn't realize it was a thing until it sort of officially became a project, because I track our project costs. And I remember the first month that came in, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like running down to Eugene's office. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And he's like, yeah, I think Mark and George are messing around on something pinball related. Like, run back to my office, call Mark. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I think that was like 2017. So that to the start of COVID, there was a lot of just messing around. Mark wasn't dedicated pinball back then. He was still, mostly arcade production management, and George was running the company over there. And COVID was the opposite of how great it was for Stern, for us. Like, we went to nothing. And I remember back in the early COVID days where they didn't know if it was like a touch virus, and it's like, well, our games are handled by kids rubbing their nose. It's just like, it's like the worst possible conduit if it's a surface contact virus.
Right.
So, we didn't sell games for a while, and that allowed, George to get on the keyboard and Mark to refine stuff. And we would have, it's a great COVID memory, but we would go to George's basement once a week, every Wednesday night, and he would have like the latest build. And his goal was like, if I can get a rule in every week you're here, it's like, we'll be done. And I know this is a deep dive, but there's not a whole lot. There's some nuance and a decent amount of breadth here, but this is not crazy. So he was able to, once he was able to take a break from not running the day-to-day, because there was no day-to-day. Our day-to-day during COVID was an 11 a.m. Zoom from our homes, where it's like, anybody have any ideas on how we want to make any money for this company? All right, have a good day, everyone. And then we went off and did nothing.
Well, I mean, the story of why Pulp Fiction was designed as a single level game, it's been well told already, as you said, with Quentin Tarantino himself asking for that kind of throwback single level layer feel. But I'm curious about how you and the team thought about it. Like, I mean, at this point, the game's been a hit. It's sold a bunch of units. It's enjoyed by the collector part of the community and the tournament players, and also arcades like the Electric Bat. But I have to imagine that, given like the modern pinball buying audience, it must have scared you to death that going this route could have been a huge disaster. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like for me, I feel like it's worth saying that it's not like a single level game. I imagine is so much cheaper to build than any other type of game. You still have 7 drops and 2 spinners and a magnet and a subway and a vuck and a spinning briefcase and all of that. So like the economics still have to work out like any other game made. And you could even, I wonder if the economics are even worse than other games, because it's unlikely you're going to be able to reuse the same type of back glass again, as just one example. So unless you all make another classic, I suppose. So can you tell me about that? Like, now it's a hit, but were you worried? You got what the constraint was, but are you worried that it was
I was
impossible?
probably the most, as someone who probably had his finger on the pulse of, the modern buying audience more than the other guys on the team. I was like, this is just going to be a fucking disaster. Like it's like, you guys don't understand how far away this is from what people are buying today. And, for us, it was, keep the project costs low. And we had a this was fun enough that I think I had projected, my guess was that we were going to sell 700 games. And at that point, we would have made our money back or somewhere close. So it's like, that's fine. And, Doug over at Chicago Gaming was really kind of the champion of, he really thinks would find a market and find an audience. And I think a lot of the things that the CGC team brought to the table, because they are a cabinet house, sort of, once we got past the, hey Mark, your wide body crazy modern design, which is what he originally pitched,
Ooh.
threw that in the garbage, we really leaned into what we were locked into having to do. And Doug tooling up that stainless steel coin door and going to, that Bally old school head size that fucked up the boxes that he was using because it's wider than his, remake boxes. There was a lot of like, we need to do this to lean into the aesthetic of what this product needs to be to potentially find a buyer that could find the value in and appreciate the aesthetic that we were going for. The speaker in the neck, that to kind of have that similar neck to those old Bally and Williams games. I think I can remember like Bond 60th sort of coming out close to when this was coming out, and the like Stern executed Bond 60th within their Stern aesthetic. And there's a version of this game that we would have done Doug would have been like, here's my remake cabinet, and where the dot matrix display is, we would have segment displays that are on an LCD wide panel, and the game would have been the same, but I think it would have just sold far less because I think the aesthetic is appreciated.
I agree, for what it's worth. Right, the aesthetic is what hits here. That it gives you that feeling, and that's a great answer. And I hope you guys somehow do make more classics. Perhaps some, like you said, as from a quote from Gomez, it's that the constraints can sometimes produce better art because of the constraint, and I think that's what happened here. But I'm going to get into dissecting the rules with you at a granular level. But first, I want to ask you some broader questions on your approach to rules design on this game.
Yeah.
In particular, the first place I like to start with a rules designer is the layout of the game, and how the layout of the game affects your approach to designing rules in general, but also, of course, how this particular layout affected your rules design. And to explain what I mean with a bit more by way of an example, and then I'll give you the floor for it, is, when we spoke with Ray Day last, talking about Star Wars Fall of the Empire, that game had a repeatable centered jump ramp, for example. So we discussed how Ray Day dealt with that in his rules, how he discourages the player from repeating that shot all day, or in small burst, how he actually encourages them to repeat it in a super jackpot on a short timer, phase. So I'd love to hear your thoughts more broadly on like considering layout when you affect rules design, and then maybe more specifically on this game.
So I think, the one thing that Ray, when and I listened to that show, like, where I think and I'll soapbox a little bit, and the Stern guys can tell me
I love it.
fuck myself. It's fine. Like, Ray gets handed a playfield, and then he has to do what he can. And I feel like at that point, you've already lost. And by that, I mean, when I'm working through rules concepts with Mark, it's at the drawing phase because we're lining up, and I feel like this is why Elwyn's games are so great, right? He's designing physically with the rules that he has in mind, and he's doing this shifting thing, and as they come and they meet, it's like, and they touch, and we're great. It becomes really hard, and Lyman and I went through with this on Cactus as we're trying to rule solve, and it's like, here's your game, good luck. And the number of times that Lyman was asking Doug, can we change an insert? I'm not gonna ask, and it's like, no man, the playfields are done. It's like, fuck, we can't even change the text on an insert, and how that drives the things you can or can't do, depending on, for me, and this is where we can sort of segue for how I appreciate rules, is I don't believe that the display should be necessary for any rule in the game. Period. As George Gomez famously said when Wizard of Oz came out 15 years ago, the game is on the playfield. And if the playfield can't tell you where to go, what to do, how close you are to getting something, you're a step behind. And that's a problem when you have a finished game handed to you that you try to solve, or in our situation, the ability to make sure that we're tying features in with inserts that I'm telling Mark we need. And Pulp was great at that because we didn't have a display. So the crutch of being able to, like, we'll just have the display, 7 more for multi-ball. And it's like, how is anyone going to have any idea when they're down here whacking away how many more for multi-ball? So it's like, we have the old school lock lights that are on the playfield that tell you how far you are and how close you are to getting something. So for me, the priority is definitely understandability and working in concert with the designer and making sure that we are showing off the playfield that he's allowing all of us to enjoy. How do we maximize these wonderful shot paths and where he's putting the ball? How do we pull that out of this in a way that connects to the player emotionally? And, we can get into the scoring nuance bullshit, which I know is your favorite, Serge.
True.
It surprises most people when they hear that is not my favorite. It is when I put on my competitive player's exploitation hat, but it is not when I am putting my design hat on. So, for Pulp, it's a lot of playing the whitewood and kind of figuring out how hard, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is this shot? How hard is this shot? And that's kind of the stuff value-wise. You end up trying to make calculations that balance things. How hard is that roll scene shot versus the briefcase shot on the left? They're kind of both the same shot, but one is insanely harder than the other one.
And is that because you do find that you could backhand like this one in a way that you can't backhand that one as much? And does that affect your, if you agree with that, first of all?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask you about some things you already touched on, which is like one of the peculiarities of this layout, and not just that it's a single level, is that it has no display screen. And so I was going to ask you, and you've already answered it though, which is, do you feel like that display screen serves as a crutch essentially for rules designers?
It has since the DMD was invented. It's allowed people to, man, I have this great idea that's 9 months after the game came out, and it's like, now imagine you had that idea 6 months before the first whitewood was cut, and you were able to talk with John Borg or Steve Ritchie or whoever about having dedicated inserts on the playfield that could support this wonderful idea you had way too late in the process. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is like, we're extremely privileged here that we don't have a production line that needs to be fed. I do sympathize with the Stern guys because on the video side, we do have that. If I can't just tell our manufacturing team, we're not going to build anything this week. You know, my walls would start to shake from Brian over at Partech, you know, screaming, like, because that's how he makes his money.
And then you also touched on the kind of hard shots versus easy shots. Probably the hardest shots in the game are the mode start and this watch
Yep.
magnet, or at least, and especially this one has like a dangerous feed coming back from it. So it sounds like you do, but you're consciously thinking about
Yeah.
the kind of how hard the shot is, and then therefore how much value to
Yeah,
assign to that shot.
I'd throw the Royale with cheese in there too. That one's tough to nick.
Right, like this one,
Yep.
you know, right over there. That makes sense to me. And another thing I feel like is happening in this game is that the flippers by design are lower, or you could say shallow. And so what that it tends to mean, I find, is that it means you could really rip a spinner pretty hard, but sort of center shots or maybe like that's why it might be hard to backhand, you know, the drop target there. So first, do you agree that Mark Ritchie often designs with shallow flippers, this Sorcerer, games like that, and then
I know how he takes a straight edge and it is the guide rail, the inlane rails to the flipper is how he likes it. And I know everyone has their, like, what about the dot that's underneath? You know, everyone has their own. Well, without a rubber, it's where the tip of the plastic meets the dot.
Right.
Okay. Mark has his way, and yeah, we work around it.
that makes sense. And I feel like because of the whatever the position of the flippers is, it means that an orbit spinner rip is like particularly juicy on this game. And that made me think, is that when you notice that, is that when you tie it to something like driving and higher miles per hour and actually showing the player that to give them the feeling, the force feedback of the ripping of a spinner?
Yeah, well, and how can we not talk about the Hall effect spinners? Like, whose idea was
Cale,
that?
not calling it an opto spinner. Thanks, buddy.
Nice job,
Everyone that's been calling it an opto spinner for years. Yeah. Doug Duba, man.
Mhm.
It rips well.
He's the fucking man. I've heard more complaints about a spinner that spins too much, and I know that there were different bearings that he was using to try to get less friction, and he didn't even choose the best one. We were like starting to choose shitty bearings on purpose to get it to spin less. And yeah, I mean, he designed this thing that will I'd love to put on some of my classic Bally and Williams games, you know, the Duba spinner, because man.
Yeah, and then you mentioned, of course, this being a single level game. Like pinball is a pretty niche world, but even within that niche of pinball designs, there are only a handful of 21st century pinball machines that have single level layouts like Pulp Fiction. I'm thinking TNA, you mentioned Bond 60th, Beatles. There's some other smaller run games like Celts and Mafia, Fathom 2.0, stuff like that. It's not a huge family we're talking about. And I actually do hear rumors that in the coming months there will be yet another single level game on the market from a manufacturer. A little bit of tease there.
Let's go.
So it's still happening, but it does pose, I find, a particularly tricky question. How do you match a classic 1980s layout with what I think is a 21st century rule set? Like you said, it doesn't have so much breadth, but it does have a lot more breadth than any other single level game, more or less. I think for me, I would be specific to say it has the most breadth of any single level game that's ever been made, modern or old.
That's fair.
So, you know, is there a tension there between matching the old layout with the modern rule set? How did you think about it?
I think it's the understanding that you don't want to waste a square inch of space that you can't tie to some kind of rules advancement, you know, foundation of the rules design. And I feel like the first game that I think was probably that stuck out to me as a fan that squeezed every target being meaningful in some way to the greater good was what Keith Johnson did in Simpsons Pinball Party. It was like you see a lot of even the great Williams games where there's a lot of like throwaway features and targets that are just like, yeah, we'll just, you know, complete those targets and Medieval, the Merlin target, just thinking about Medieval because of the Merlin's targets, which is this 3-bank, and you've seen the kind of rules that Lyman has put on a 3-bank, you know, since then, you know, Walking Dead, Batman with all the minor villains.
Right.
Like, that lit Merlin, which was a mystery award. See you later. So, you know, the idea and the notes that Lyman had on the medieval update for what he planned on doing with that bank. I think allow the thoughts he had on being able to see where pinball went and be able to, how can we get more out of this set of targets? That was really Pulp. How do I get something out of everything that's going on here that's connected to sort of that divine intervention foundation? There's not a lot of side. The only real side quest I think is really the MPH bonus, and that was probably the last rule in the game because it used to be this say what mode from the that interaction part of the movie where you're saying say what again, and then a lot of swear words and blah 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 blah, and you're kind of playing that scene out, and it didn't work, so we threw it away, and it became this thing that is now outside of that divine intervention,
Right.
rule set of qualification. But I think the best games tie that breadth of content to the requirements to get to the end, and that's where the magic happens.
And then, like you mentioned, putting stuff on and getting more out of targets. A 3-bank eventually becomes Walking Dead, and it gives you so much information, so much you can get out of it. Do you think you could take it too far? Like, not to call out any friends, but like something like Avengers AIQ with 3 drops. Is that taking it too far or not taking it too far?
Yeah, it's taking it too far.
Was I leading the witness with that question?
I mean, I actually don't think Avengers is too bad because the grid actually has inserts on it.
It tells you.
So it's not as bad. But I would.
Right. Not the 3 in a row. It doesn't tell you what happens if you get a 3 in a row, but it does tell you the individual ones.
Elton John, I still don't know. There's just
Right.
9 inserts in the center in front of that 3-bank that have no text on it, and
Right.
they just exist to me. I don't know. I still don't know what they do. They just exist to me.
That's a good call out. The Elton John. I use Avengers as my like complexity 3 target, peak, but Elton John is worth the conversation too because you have to hit them for that eventual multi-ball.
Avengers gets a little wonky with the tic-tac-toe awards where that stuff gets off in the like, what did I just get? Well, if you look up at the display, you can see that clearly the diagonal
Right.
left to right gets you,
Right.
dial it back.
Right, and then there's big games, so it's been done for a while,
Yeah.
kind of craziness. But one of the things of being a single level game is naturally there's probably a shorter ball time compared to other more modern layouts. And one thing I find, maybe let me ask you, does that affect your planned depth of the rules of the game for you? Like how much they're actually, not just breadth of different viable strategies at the beginning, but the depth of what you get in the end if ball times are going to be short?
Yeah, for sure. And I see it. Our new game is on the brain, but watching people.
Oh, you guys are making a new game.
We are. How about that? 2031. We'll see you there. But people, for me, and I think what's really good is like Mark Ritchie is, as far as a skill level of player, is like the fucking dream because he's not terrible.
He's not great, right?
But he's also not great.
Right.
He understands pinball, but also would definitely not understand some of the rule nuance. If you threw something up on a display that you did something right to left for double value, blah, 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 he would be totally lost. So, he's kind of the North Star of, I'll get a message from Tim and it's like, oh, Mark played a game today. It's like, well, what did he get? What features did he get? And it's like somebody else plays and it's like, they got this and they got this. It's like, okay, you don't want to run. And a lot of this is, just the pacing of features and how they're coming at you. I think that's kind of, you can have your breadth and your depth, but the pacing of that content is probably the most important in making sure that like, did the office manager who stopped over to double flip today, did they get anywhere? And it's like, they actually started 2 things. Fucking awesome. All right, cool. So making sure that you're really, as much as I enjoy the conversation in the Ray Day channel of that very niche of a sub-niche group of high-level players that look at a game in specifically one way, that is not where my focus is when it comes to the design side.
No, I love hearing that, and we're going to get into like different aspects of breadth and depth and all that. But one of them is pacing, and I usually call it the Elwyn Award, right? Because in that Elwyn game, like the features are paced out well enough that you always feel like you're close to something, even whether you're just starting the game or you're like a newbie, or even if you're advanced. There's always something that you're close to that way. And But one thing I've noticed about short ball time games within the niche of making pinball is, and a lot of modern games are purposely made not to have short ball times. They're in your home collector, and that want to play for a while. But this, generally speaking, has shorter ball times. And a lot of other games like this opt for a really tight gameplay loop. Like if you look at TNA, there's the one main thing to do, and it's a great game, to be clear. Like TNA is a great game, but it's one tight gameplay loop. The loop is, as you go further in the game, it's made harder. You have to do more things through that loop, or there's different display effects and sounds that happen, lighting and so forth, from getting through it. Or even Beatles is a single level game with a fairly tight gameplay loop. It's you plunge, you're in a mode, and you do the thing in the mode, and then you get the super jackpot or the collect of the stand up behind the drops, and you do it again. But this game isn't quite like that with a tight gameplay loop. It's like you have your modes, or you could go for the two different multi balls, or you could try to get your playfield multiplier going up, or go for characters. There's just a lot to do. It's not focused on one tight loop. How do you think about it in terms of that, like the games that go for this tight gameplay loop versus not, and why do you decide the way you decided?
I think breadth, that kind of breadth of content is probably the most important to the modern buying audience. I think, there's a lot of those one-note games. I mean, fuck, the ADHD-ness that I see in like my kid, like the people are just not, they move on. And if you don't offer a wide enough content, in my opinion, it's very easy for someone to move on from your game. So, to me, the breadth was really important, but then it was also like, all right, let's drill down on these sort of core breadth features. And I want to make sure if someone does nothing but this, they can be entertained through that process. And if they want to play it again and do nothing but that, then they can be entertained. So it's really just the attention and pulling out that connection to the player for all of those things that makes them meaningful to their experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I was thinking, I have an argument in my head back and forth, and I'll just to give our viewers a sense of my insanity, that like with the newest game from JJP, from Sonic, and we were talking about Elton John before, but with Sonic, it's a pretty tight gameplay loop. Like you're going through the Sonic levels, and you beat the level, you get the flag, and then you fight the boss, and that's what you do over and over again. And thematically, that makes sense on brand for Sonic. But the layout, it's not a short ball time necessarily game. It's like a fan layout and with an upper playfield. It's not necessarily for a good player a tight, like the type of game that maybe makes sense to be without to having a tight gameplay loop. Feel free not to comment on that if you don't want to, Josh, but or do if you do.
I mean, I haven't played it a whole lot. I think, what you're saying about it is stuff I am hearing about it from other people that have played. Where, yeah, there is, again, playfield layout and rules design early in the process, and trying to find those puzzle pieces and trying to make them mate, and it's really hard.
Yeah, I think that's where I was thinking is like, are those it on the one hand, it's an interesting code and good for the theme, and the layout's interesting and can be fun, but are those actually being married well, like the code and layout in the game? I'm not so sure, to be honest.
I feel like, I've been blessed with, officially being on this team with Mark, but unofficially being on plenty of teams over the last 20 years of jumping in and having conversations as games have gone from Whitewood to prototype to production. And yeah, the collaborative nature of what Mark brings to the team members that are on his team is an order of magnitude better than anyone else I've ever seen do this. And I think that probably speaks to, his time at Williams, and he was kind of the Python guy, and a lot of the stuff they did together, that perhaps it was just that environment that led him to being kind of this egoless, just as insecure as everyone else that does this, but is happy for the game to be better via the help from anyone. The mailman dropping off a packet, anyone that has an idea that can make the game better, he is so welcoming to that. And I think that's what helps us get to, this position here.
Love that. In terms of inspiration for rule sets, do you look at 80s layouts, single level, and did you get anything from them? Like, what's your favorite rule set from the 80s or earlier, if you prefer it? You don't have to say Barracuda, but you might have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me,
Designed by his dad,
and,
for
and
those watching.
like, for me, the rules in this game, a lot of it was, you know, I I have a pretty good database of rules in my head. It's certainly, as the kids have arrived and my competing has been less, it's not what it used to be. But being able to, you know, honor Mark with a lot of the rules in Pulp that are from previous Mark games. That was something that I was able to do just to kind of thank him for what Taxi has meant to. Taxi was the first game on the line when my dad moved us out to Williams and took us into work at his new job after he moved us from the East Coast. And it's just miles of these yellow cabinets, and Zach and I just walking through, and don't you dare walk outside the painted yellow lines on the floor, like you will get murdered. So we'd walk around, and it's like that was the first game, and the idea of picking up these passengers and getting the jackpot, and how can I take that to a more modern level with the constraints we have of having, in essence, the same display as Taxi, or worse, because Taxi at least had the 16-digit connected. We didn't have that many digits connected. Mm-hmm. So, there is something where I get to enjoy calling back to that era of games, but maybe putting a little spin on it to tweak it to whatever, the nerd in me that enjoys the nuance of, like, maybe I'll collect the characters now, or maybe I'll risk it all and try to get them all before I do it because it's 5x value. And most people can not give a shit about that. But the core of the entertainment of the rule of getting to, hear these iconic lines from these characters, that's the focus first. And then if there's room for me to nerd out and get made fun of at work for nerding out, when I do choose to push on that gas pedal, it's fine. I can have my cake and eat it too sometimes.
Yeah, I have a few slides on some inspirations here. Tell me if you agree.
Yeah.
This one, like, seeing Pulp Fiction on the left and Taxi on the right, also designed by Mark Ritchie, of course. Same position, more or less, carry passengers, carry characters, kind of a stand-up. Did you know about that, Cale?
Yeah, because you clued me into it. Yeah.
Okay, good. And I am the kind of guy, Josh, who cares and gives a shit about it. So we have this.
The fact that you appreciate that makes me feel good when we knowingly do that. And good. It's like you wonder if anyone gives a shit, and it's like Serge probably gives a shit. So that's good. We got one. We got one.
You got me. And then also, like, you even have the 5 characters in the center. There's 5 characters in the center for Taxi, but also on Diner. There's 5 characters in the center for Diner there. And then Diner, for me, an underrated game. I'm maybe the only one out there who says it, but I think so. I think it's a great game. Unrelated, but what is your favorite non-Pulp Fiction Mark Ritchie game? Can you pick one?
Man.
Cale, maybe same question.
Sorcerer.
So many of his games have just terrible exploits as a competitive player.
The competitive player hates
bonkers. I'd love to circle the wagons with Mark on some of his stuff.
Maybe there's time for code updates.
I don't know, like, taking the scoring nuances out of it. I think, like, Indy Jones is amazing in terms of how he brought that theme to life.
Yeah, and it has a similar multi-ball up the middle too. Maybe that's another
inspiration. It does, Serge. It sure does.
That's we're going. I'm cooking here that way. So that's another one. Even Fishtails has a bit of a similar layout shot.
Call that the briefcase multi-ball right there. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And then here's a deep cut. Is in the early days of his designs, he was putting spinners on the orbits, including on this game that only has 10 copies in a prototype ever made, which was.
He's got a playfield in his office of that one.
Does he?
He does.
Tell him you guys should release that as your next.
Yeah.
It's gonna crush. Like Josh. This is 1982's Thunderball, something like that. And so there you go. I have at least one more question on, like, a general layout kind of thing, which is, and this is particularly nerdy within the context of us being nerds here, is that is that there's no in-lane returns on because it's a single level game. So there's nothing like ramps to bring the ball back through an in lane, or maybe even like on Halloween has like subways that bring it back to an in lane. But so the frequency of how often a ball goes through an in lane could change the very concept of how much reward you tie to it. And in Pulp Fiction, one of the innovative things I think is that it has rewards for going through the unlit in lane and for going through the lit in lane. Can you tell me your thinking about that? Do you think that that level of depth of saying, this not having in-lane returns means that you could add higher value to those in-lanes?
It certainly does. You see the games where, I mean, I think about Stern's Rolling Stones when it first came out, and being able to shoot the center ramp indefinitely to complete your 4 in lanes at the bottom to just bonus X until you didn't feel like doing it anymore, I guess, until you win. And eventually they did, update the code where the left side you couldn't change across sides, but they're no doubt cognizant of, just how often, and I play, since I do play a lot of old pinball, there's a familiarity with you make a shot, and that does not guarantee that you will ever get to even attempt to make another shot. Where in modern pinball, there's a good chance if you make a shot, it is probably feeding a flipper to make another shot. So if you never miss, you will never die.
Yeah, Star Trek, Stern Star Trek, stuff like that. I'll tell you a way I think about it. Tell me if you think this is valid. Is that when you don't have in-lane returns, you either have to, like most modern, when you don't have in-lane returns, right, you could attach high value like this game does. Pulp Fiction has your bonus X attached to it. It also has drive fast, and we can get into that. But and then other games like TNA have the ball save feature if you go through the in lanes. So something that really matters if you go through the in lanes. But if you're a modern game and you do go through the in lanes, you really have two choices. You either make it low value, like it doesn't matter much, like let's say King Kong. If you go through the right in lane, it doesn't do that much. If you hit the magnet spider pit, it maybe increases your progress there a bit more. But it's not some thing you're going to try to always go through the in lanes for or thinking about consciously. Or you can make them high value, but you have to restrict it in some way. So in Stranger Things, it gives you bonus X on a bonus heavy game, but they don't give you bonus X all the time when you go through the inlanes. You go through it like twice to get them. Or like Avengers, it gives you the locks for Iron Man, and that's high value, but they don't let you switch it manually. You have to hit a spinning disc randomly. So I don't know. Do you buy that kind of logic?
I do. I think on the design side, I think the having lanes that are connected in some way, so whether you're filling all 4 out or these lanes are connected because it does, you're allowed to toggle through your 1, 2, 3, 4. That is much easier to do and commit to when you don't have a repeatable shot that will guarantee to feed your in lane. I think what you see in more modern games, the correct approach is that these lanes are not connected together. The right in lane will do something for a feature. I'm thinking about our next game that does have that modern problem.
Oh, you guys are making a next game?
But
I'm kidding.
5 years away. But going down an in lane and a feature is started, Godzilla, like Rampage, you're not spelling something or linking them in any way that then opens the door to like, oh shit, now ZMAC is just going to do this
nonstop in lanes.
And it's like, well, you can't lane change. And it's like, well, that sucks because now you're ruining the experience for the people that don't do this. And they wonder why they never get to something. And so I think you got to focus on that at the beginning and be like, well, let's drive story here instead with a returnable shot that then directs the player's attention to not the shot that brings it back to the same place.
Love that. I have one more lane-related question, which is on your dad's game, Barracora, which has the top lanes double letters or whatever. I think that was the first game to do something like that. And then it was done, and again, John Wick at Stern, where your brother works. Tell me how you feel about double letter spelling on lanes.
I can only imagine, and I have an appreciation for whatever version of my dad back then that was probably far more into Serge territory as someone who was walking in and talking with Steve Ritchie and whoever. I can only imagine what everyone else thought about my dad with this rules nuance bullshit and whatever drugs he was doing, that he had these wild and crazy ideas for, well, there's bonus X, but then there's also super bonus X. And it's like, Roger, you just got to go, man. Get out of here.
I appreciate that too, and
It's
I
way
thought
more
you.
appreciated now, 40 years later, than I'm sure it was in the room back then.
Yeah, yeah, great answer,
I
Cale.
think
What do you think about double litter lanes?
Barracora was originally Las Vegas, and I believe Steve Ritchie called it Las Bogus back in the day inside the halls of William.
You're getting one, right, Cale? Maybe.
Barracora, we're working on it. Yeah, we're working on getting one. We just had the seller needs to add some coin mechs and fix the coin door so we can make some money with it. But yeah, we're trying to get one.
Cool. All right, I have one last general question, and before we dive into the specifics, and yes, we have not yet dived into the specifics.
Yeah. Oh man,
Uh,
I forgot
but
what show is coming on.
yeah, this is not the half-hour podcast kind of show, even for a single level game. But you've obviously, and you mentioned this, work with Lyman a whole lot. I'd love to ask you just, he's often considered one of, if not the greatest rules designer in pinball history. What kind of things did you learn from him? And I suppose you touched on it already, but that you could share with us.
The big thing is that good rules design is about storytelling. It's not about scoring. And you can handle figuring out scoring stuff later, but the core job is you're a movie director. Your job is to entertain. And via how you choreograph the story you're telling via lights and sound and music and turning up on certain, playing fishtails, and it's no problem shooting all those ramps to string your monster fish together, and you just know the moment you hit the last one and your 20 million hurry up starts in the left orbit,
You're gonna miss.
you're gonna fucking miss.
Yeah.
And why? Because Chris Granner just threw some music at you that demands your heart rate goes up by 20 beats per minute, and your adrenaline starts to kick in, and it's like all those things. The ability for a piece of wood with two buttons on the outside to influence your emotions. I mean, it's crazy, but that is what makes pinball so special to me. I mean, it's the dumbest game in the world. It's two buttons and a box, and the things that I've seen it do to people emotionally, is insane. I'm sure Cale at tournaments at the Bat has seen plenty, but it can drive grown people insane.
Yeah,
Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
I'd add that here we're not here to talk about your tournament play, but one thing that's enjoyable about watching your tournaments is the emotion that you feel inside is expressed outside while you're playing.
Yeah.
And that's not true for all pinball players. I know all pinball players do feel the emotion you're saying, but most don't show it, and I appreciate that you show it.
But yeah, and I apologize to Lyman hundreds of times and the other to Dwight hundreds of times. Like, the teenage version of me that would walk into their offices and throw all sorts of awesome rules ideas at them, and then reading back through my notes, and it's like, these are all just fucking terrible. Not only for the point of like, I think you should just do this, and knowing that I just told them to like rip out months of work and do something that's clearly months of work. Total disregard for what that does to them as like software engineer humans, and really focusing on like Lyman taught me a lot about just problem solving, and especially on Cactus, again, sort of going back to when you're blessed to have a team that incorporates rules design and physical design in tandem, it gives the best chance for those to meet. Cactus was not that. So it was a lot of, we have an idea, how do we tell this story? Is it possible to tell this story? And the answer more often than not was like, no, garbage. I really like the rule though. It's garbage. You can't do it. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Save it for another game, whatever. So I think it's a lot of the just, getting out of your own way a lot of the times, and simpler is better. So often I know that like the mode I speak about that's one of my favorite modes of all time is Seance in Adam's Family, and the rule is shoot either ramp 3 times. Dumb. Talking with Keith Elwin recently, and one of his favorite modes is the spiral from Twilight Zone. Shoot a fucking orbit. But you get that custom music and the voice barking at you to shoot the spiral, and then you shoot it, and then the magnet grabs it, and then what Ted was able to do on software for you feel the magnet grab the ball, feel the magnet like 2 buttons on a piece of wood, but you feel the sensation of an electrified magnet grabbing a ball. Why? Sounds, the display, the lighting when it happens, the shock, all that stuff. That's all the magic. All you did was shoot an orbit.
That's very beautifully put. And my example of that is the barn mode in Walking Dead with linemen. It's like you're just shooting the left orbit. That's all you're doing. But it gets more valuable. You could hear the music pumping. You see when you're killing a zombie or walker as you're going through the orbit, so you feel it. And in this game too, like an orbit shot for drive fast, it makes you feel a lot because the orbit rips, the spinner rips a lot. The sound of the car going, the revving the engine, even on the alphanumeric display, if you want to turn your head up, you can see the speed that you're going and all of that. So you feel it.
That's it. If Mark decides that a rule is worthy of being put in the game, that's the easy part. The hard part is how do you squeeze all the juice you can out of. I mean, drive fast is a shoot the orbit rule. It's dumb. It's nothing.
Well, that covers the general side of this. Before getting into the specifics, Cale, anything you want to ask before we dive in?
No, let's do it.
All right. And so what I mean by specifics is we're going to attempt to explain through at least these 10 criteria that we care about here on the show of what I think makes great pinball rules. We'll go through them one by one and say what Pulp Fiction does here. Before I do, though, Josh, question to you. Do you think about pinball in this way of giving all of these things, or is it more at a subconscious level?
I love the Serge criteria, man. No, it's solid. It's
warm. I wasn't. You're not being paid to say that, but I appreciate it.
It is. It's always in the brain. As Mark Ritchie, most of the time, and like he'll get an email from me of like shower thoughts. The number of emails that with the subject line shower thoughts ... It's where I do my best thinking of this stuff.
Awesome. And of course, so there's, as Cale has reminded me, really there's an 11th criteria that I always include for Cale, which is the Cale criterion, quarter drops. Cale, you tell me, how does this go for you at the arcade? How much money has Pulp Fiction made you? And are you a millionaire now?
I'm getting there. It just takes time. Pulp Fiction has always been in our top 10. I mean, people love this game. It looks, Josh was talking earlier about what Doug did to make this cabinet look classic. And I still to this day, there are plenty of men and women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that come into the arcade that have maybe like forgotten about pinball. And they're pointing at fishtails. I remember this one, and they always come to Pulp Fiction and go, I don't remember this one. I don't remember this one. It's funny. It fits that vibe. Another very important thing is these guys know how to build a pinball machine. And if you're familiar with the Batcast, I will let the public know if a certain company does not build a machine that is ready for public. And this one, straight out of the box, it's just killer. I think there's only been like a handful of like code updates, but like from the day you opened it up, this thing was solid. It felt like a finished game, and kudos to the team. And I'll tell you one thing that's really impressive. We had actually one issue with the game, and then there's always, it's pinball, issues are going to come up. Where a coil burned up. Within the next 3 weeks, the team released a software update that kept this from happening again. So these guys are on top of it.
Here. Nice job. And Cale is now.
Clip that, Cale.
Yeah, clip that, right.
You need to sell some games, brother.
Right. This has helped Cale achieve omakase status at Japanese restaurants now, right, Cale?
That's right.
Okay, so let's get into the other ones, though, less important than actually making money, and that's the most important one, so let's always point that out. But moments. So when I talk about moments on the show, it's easy to point out moments that are made because of the mechs in a game, like shooting the ball out of a ship in JJP's Pirates is a moment. Of course, that's definitely a moment. But moments like that are layups sometimes for the rules designer. I'm more interested in moments. We were talking about the we drive fast as an example that are made entirely because of rule design and choreography. You mentioned you mentioned Seance in Adam's Family, but I might even say like the multi-ball start in Adam's Family. It's just shooting a scoop.
for
You know,
sure.
it's not like a
Yeah.
big mech or anything. And Pulp Fiction has those. I'll name a few in my mind. But for you, Josh, like how important is creating moments, the pinball moment to you, and was it more challenging here because of
It,
either the theme or the layout or something?
everything. I would like make that the only main criteria bullet point, and then you do the indentation where it's like all the other
Subpoints.
ones are hyphens underneath it. But that's that's the core of what creates core memories from someone walking up to a pinball game and becoming connected to that machine in some way that they had no idea it was going to hit them with a left hook the way it did, and they're hooked forever. And I, unfortunately, being who I am, the only story I don't have is the how I got into pinball story. What got you hooked? I don't fucking remember. I've been playing since I was nothing. My kids don't have that memory either. They just went downstairs one day and started playing. But most people you talk to know exactly the first game they played, and it's amazing to think that a machine could do that to someone that can remember it for decades as they move on in life. So moments are it.
Love to hear that. For me, by the way, it's like Sparky, Multiball, and Metallica. You know, that just feels like I did something incredible, and all I did is hit up the middle like a bozo. You know,
Yeah,
over and
my
over again.
youngest kid, I mean, that's one of his first. When he was old enough to give a shit that he was playing. Like it was one of the things that he started wanting to go for because he could electrocute that dude and make him shake, and the flashers going off, it connected to him, and he was 2 or whatever.
It's wild. There's so many in this game that are moments, and it's amazing to have a single level game without a display. Have so many moments when more moments than a lot of other modern games that I think maybe it's the reason because they rely on the display and they're thinking a lot of these other indented bullet points that follow this one that it's not they have one or two moments but it's not like how do I create a lot of moments in this game. And for I mentioned drive fast as one. I'm going to show a few videos of some of the moments. The sound has been turned off, and I know sound is a big contributor to why it matters in the
Yeah.
moment, but it would be too loud on the screen. So um, in this one, this is the mode collect,
Oh
and you
yeah.
could see it flashing, that way. Kel, I'm not. You don't hear the audio, right?
Nope.
Okay, cool. And so he does nail it, and it gives you the force feedback, the lighting that you feel from hitting it that way. So anyway, that's just one I wanted to show is just the mode collect. That was from Carl, a friend of the show. I usually miss that shot. But
Me too. Me too.
yeah. So yeah, tell me about that. Like how conscious of that was a moment for you. You certainly put the value of the shot there. It's worth all the mode points you've collected. But it's the lighting, it's the sounds, it's everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the things that I can't take credit for. That's the easiest way to say it is, you know, I came up with the rule: shoot the hole that you started at in the last 10 seconds, and I'll handle how much that's worth and everything. Outside of that, it's George Petro, it's David Thiel making something that, David on purpose. Like I want someone fucking freaking out that, it's the fishtails monster fish. If
Yep.
your blood isn't starting to pump when if you glance up and see that you're at like a crazy great mode going on and you're at 13 seconds and it's like, oh fuck, in 3 seconds I have to like shoot this hole, and David's like, oh yeah, and you're gonna shoot it with like this music that's now making it harder for you. It's like, why does the music make it harder? I don't know, because I'm a human and it just does. And what George does with the lighting, both in the transition to that end of ball sequence, and then if you are fortunate enough to collect it, that's the moment. I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it really reminds me of this, that like the rule doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be make a shot in the last 10 seconds. That's it.
That's my core. I mean, that's why it's pretty easy to be a rules guy when you have a team of people that understand the rule doesn't matter without the support to bring the rule to life.
Yep. Here's another one. This is from Bowen, and this is him about to get into the shot. So he's played all 4 modes, and it's flashing like crazy. And then during this mode, you feel like you're giving the adrenaline shot to Uma Thurman by hitting the drop. Anything you would add while this is playing?
No.
And it
Just
gives you the
good.
feedback.
I know, and I mean, what's great is when you're working with pros, you walk through David, like, hey, here's the story we're telling in this mode, and, riff, man, let him cook. And, he knows the scene, and it's like, he came up with the idea of definitely this sort of Horde Walking Dead vibe, and using the heartbeat because of the adrenaline shot and incorporating the heart and walking through that. It's like, let Dave cook, man. The number of times it's like, hey, here's the one. It's like, yeah, I'll get you guys something in a week. And then you throw it in and it's like, holy shit. And then, George is like, I got to program something lighting wise that supports what David just threw at us. And that's the concert of everyone. You're making a movie. You're making a playable, movie that the player is walking through. And it's like, sound editing and light, all the stuff that's important in movie making is important here when you're trying to connect to the person who is hitting 2 buttons with their fingers on this giant box.
Here. And this last one, just to show at least one of the multi-ball starts. So here he gets into the briefcase boogie multi-ball. Look at the, Cal, I don't know if you ever noticed this. I'll show it again. It shows you 666, like the lock combination.
I've noticed that one. Man.
Yeah, that's right. And bringing it all in, and then the briefcase suddenly dances, which it doesn't otherwise in the game. Not except for certain very limited modes. But it's actually giving you that feeling with the song. It helps to have the song, of course, too. But you feel incredible after you're starting that. And it also, it helps a lot, I think, when multi-balls or moments have like a staging area where the gameplay can pause.
I remember that was like in talking with Lyman and going in early on Walking Dead, and it was like one of his first comments was like, the ball doesn't stop anywhere. It's like, I have a couple of magnets which you cannot even rely on that the ball is there. You don't even know it's there, so you can't do anything that's super crazy. And then it's like, I have a Woodbury shot back to the plunger lane. Other than that, it's live ball. And, the things he was able to do within that constraint was even more spectacular. And you don't even realize, how hard it is to do that until you try to do that.
We did a 3.5-hour podcast on just Walking Dead as like a deep dive, and that was one of the things that kept coming back to is that there's no staging area in that game, which can make it really harder to get moments to you, to the player. But like Lyman makes like a whole vibe in that game. Like you feel like you're facing zombies everywhere you go, and so like, what do you do when you can't stop a ball? You lean into it.
You lean into the vibe, man.
Right. So here on that. So anyway, all this to say, there's other moments we didn't even point to in these videos. During the multi-balls themselves, when you get to the super payoff phases, when you're going through the colors of the jackpots, red, yellow, green, up to blue, and like just feeling that lighting, and you could tell that you're higher in the multi-ball based on the colors, and all of that also feels like a lot of moment in the game that way. Next one I wanted to talk to you about, though, is theme immersion. So again, when I talk about it, I'm stressing that I'm talking about this in terms of rules design. Like mechanical will always help. If you have that ship firing the ball, that helps. Or the briefcase, in this case, opens up with a golden glow. Like that's theme immersive. But on the sound side, you have 5 licensed songs. You have 250 lines of dialogue. But I notice you don't really have almost any pinball-y callouts. There's not one call out that says switch frenzy or shoot everything, or even jackpot. There's no call out for jackpot.
Yeah.
The only call out I think is Mark Ritchie himself, saying like roll cameras or at the end there.
That's placeholder speech for when we get Quentin's speech. as the
Oh,
director.
is that still happening?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's
Any
say
day
good
now,
answer.
before our next game comes out, I'm sure.
Good answer. Good answer. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Is like, what about that process? You're already constricted because it's a single level layout. You're constricted because you don't have a display. But you add this other thing, like you're not going to put on callouts even. And I think it benefits from not having the callouts for what it's worth. Not saying like hit everything. Like I don't think there should ever be a callout that says shoot everything. I think that's like really sad when that happens. So tell me your thought process of kind of theme immersion in general, but especially like no
I
callouts.
I hate breaking the fourth wall that you're playing
Yeah.
a pinball machine. It drives me bananas. I think, to speak back to Adam's family, when you start Seance, it's the audio cue is knock 3 times.
Mhm.
Good luck, and you're off you go.
Right. Doesn't say hit the left ramp.
As you're locking balls in Twilight Zone, it's telling you don't touch the door. Don't touch the door. What the fuck does that mean? The
Right.
modern version of that goes so well is like, shoot the right lock shot to advance multi-ball, and it's like you lost me. And this was a big, in Pulp, there was, because we had 80 years to get this done, there was talk of custom speech, and you see all the custom speech call-outs of like, if we can get Sam Jackson or whatever, and it's like, drive fast, shoot that orbit, and I'm like, like, and arguing with Mark about like, dude, I can't do it. I can't. I'm like, this is what makes games so special. Is you're not shooting an orbit. You're driving a car. If you were driving really fast on the street, who's talking about orbits? It doesn't mean anything. And so it's like, just don't break the wall. Live in the moment. Live in the theme that you are trying to immerse by doing that. And we did like the inserts that say payoff. It said jackpots originally, and you end up sort of having a good time about leaning into it. It's like, can we do this game with just not using jackpot? And we had this like email thread of alternative terms
Payoffs.
that we could use that are not jackpots, and payoffs won, but there were other far worse ideas in there. But there is it's like I feel like jackpot is a pinball thing. It breaks the fourth wall. Obviously, we have extra ball. You have places where you do, but minimizing the amount of times that you do that, I think, helps with the immersive experience.
I'm 100% in agreement for what it's worth. And why do you think it is that pinball manufacturers or rules designers or the choreography team, whoever it is on the software side, like doesn't want to embrace this very clear point that I think you made?
I don't know, but they maybe they've forgotten what made them fall in love with pinball in the first place. I find it mind-blowing how people don't recognize what Larry DeMar did for the advancement of pinball storytelling. And even Lyman would say that. There's no Lyman without Larry. And the ability for, him to trust that the player will find a way based on how I'm going to light things, and they don't need that holding of a hand because it ruins the moment. It ruins the moment. And I don't know if people don't care about it as much just because they're coming at it from enjoying the rules nuance part of design. That's something you'd have to ask Ray. I've yelled at Ray enough times about, him geeking off into the stratosphere on his rules choices that I just wouldn't make a lot
Friend
of
of the
those
show.
choices because I just don't feel it's important to selling games.
Yeah, I
And
wonder.
we make games to sell games. That's what we do.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a modern kind of version of grade inflation, or like you just don't want to everyone has to do well, and so you want to just spell it out for people, but it just ultimately leads to like a weaker product, I think, when you spell it out for people. I at least if you're gonna I like at least if you're going to include pinball-y callouts, that there's some setting where you could turn it off. At least like I know Barrels is doing that now with Bon Jovi, for example. Like they'll tell you jackpot or this or that, but you could turn it off too, and something that immerses you more in the theme. I wish it was default that way, but I'm with you.
Yeah, I think instead of turning it off, find the right call out that marries what you're doing as the player at that moment to the audio call that supports that within the theme that you are working on.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, the problem is it's hard, and it takes a lot of time to do something that you feel is right. And I feel like a lot of even like bad Williams games from the 90s got all this shit right. And it's one of those, you don't even appreciate it until you play games that don't have it. It's like a lot of it is just totally unnoticed by the player of just like, Circus Voltaire's on the brain because of just got released,
Yep.
but like what Cameron did there, where you shoot the ramp and lock the ball, towards high wire multi-ball, and it's like you feel like you did more than shoot a pinball ramp into a lock mechanism. And it's like that's it. The attention to just diving in to that theme and making the moment support the theme as best you can. That's the art.
Yeah, that game has a ton of good choreography
Yeah.
to create moments. That's for sure. Circus Voltaire. Cale, anything you'd want to add here?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, for me, although there's a lot of creative decisions we could talk about that, that improve theme immersion, like how that you have, lock 1 is 6 and lock 3 is 666, and you're unlocking the briefcase. There's all that nuance of theme immersion, but maybe like one of the most creative, elegant decisions was not to use a lot of pinball callouts. It really helps with immersion, so that's why I was focusing on it here. Okay, now we've done theme immersion. The next one is breadth. So this is there's a lot to do in this game. We're gonna right from the very beginning, and this is where we get into a lot of the rules and deep minutia here. So strap in. And what I like about this game is there really isn't one single viable strategy like you see in a lot of other games. I said it earlier, and I think it's true. This has the most breadth of any single level layout game ever made. Beatles, I enjoy the game. You're doing really going to correspond to, you're going to do whatever the mode tells you. If you're, play the pop bumper mode, you have to get in the pops. So shoot the, side loop to get it up there, and magnet traps it, and so forth. And if you're in the spinner mode, you're going to shoot the spinners. So you're going to do the thing it tells you to do. But in this game, you really can do quite a lot. How important was that for you? Not just to have a lot to do, but to have it be viable to do those things.
You want debate among if you switch on your rules hat, I don't want there to be the one way to play it. That's boring. There's a lot of games that are boring for that reason. It's like, and a lot of good games that tell a lot of great stories that have a decent amount of breadth. It's just that 90% of the breadth doesn't matter, to winning a game or deep diving into scoring nuance. A lot of it is just side quest stuff that's irrelevant. So the breadth is there to support. I'm a briefcase guy, I'm a pawn shop guy, I'm a pawn shop guy, but I don't even play for jackpots in pawn shop. I use that to go MPH for free. So giving all of these options to explore the breadth, to make it happen for yourself as a player. I mean, that's the easy part for me as a player. So I'm making games that I want for me. And if I find myself, I was just telling Tim the other day, there's going to become a time with this next game where all I'm going to do is show up and play this feature all game. And then I'm going to play this feature all game. And you just start, this is too much. Wasn't that hard to get the score I got. And you're spinning plates, and you try to make sure that they're all spinning at the same speed, and it's really hard and takes a lot of time. And I feel bad for the companies that don't get the time to exhaust that process out before the game is out, and then you're left watching some exploit happen. It's just like, oh my god. And even Pulp had a couple of those when it came out. It's just like, are you fucking serious? People are actually doing this? Like,
right,
come
clean
on.
the car. Right.
And that's been fixed.
I know.
Right.
Yeah. You look at what the score balancing is. If it's clean the car, people are overplaying it.
And
You remove that
the clean the car was we played it on prototype spinners that spun at a certain rate, and it wasn't until the game was released I was just like,
Hall effect.
How many spins are you getting on this? Are you serious?
Right. And I think it reminds me of one of my favorite classics from the 80s and earlier is Flash Gordon. And
yeah.
there are a lot of reasons I love it, but one of them is you really don't have one strategy you go for in that game. You could light the spinners, you could go for bonus X, you can go for the drops, you can do all sorts of things, and it's like a really amazing code for its time, that way.
No doubt.
Maybe the closest modern single level game with breadth is like Bond 60th, but even there, even though you can do different things like the main multi-ball and the modes and gadgets and Bond characters, in the end, when you watch people play it, it's going for the multi-ball as like the main thing you do. And in this game, you could watch a tournament with high level players, and they're going to be doing something different each one of them.
Yeah, I think also the big difference that we have that those other games have is the design choice for there to not be stacking. And
should I skip ahead to that?
you can if you want.
Let's do it. You know what? Because I have some questions leading to that. Yeah, I have a
Sure.
lot of slides, obviously. All right, so my question for you. One second. We're gonna go back for later, but let's get to the stacking thing. So I know you're not on this list yet, but I'm gonna add in you right there to say, like, your different approaches to stacking for those just joining us, not so familiar with it, is how many features can you have running at once? On the open side of the equation, generally speaking, there are games that have specific nuances, but on JJP's games, you're going to have modes and multi-balls flow into each other. You could start a multi-ball, then a mode, and then a multi-ball, multiple multi-balls going on at once, all of that. On the closed side of things is more like barrels so far, where when you're in Dune and you're playing a prophecy mode, you can't also play a multi-ball. And then Stern somewhere in the middle. But Josh, my question to you is, this game has a lot of restricted stacking. Is that for you a design choice for this game specifically, or do you think about that as something you favor in general?
The latter.
I figured that.
And mostly from again, love scoring nuances and blah, blah, blah. Storytelling. It's when you want to maximize your chances at connecting with the player who's standing in front of this wooden box and pressing two buttons, the ability to make sure that what David Thiel has created for this thing you're in and what George Petro has created for this thing you're in, that experience, nothing can get in the way of that experience. And the side benefit of that is you do get to score balance a lot easier because there isn't a version of Clean the Car that's, oh shit, we need to worry about someone, mode scoop, bam, briefcase lock 3, let's fucking go. And it's like, then you're seeing scores that are just like, oh God, so now do we have to like nuke it? And then you end up driving people towards the only way to succeed is stacking. And so it ruins it from an entertainment experience, and I think it really ends up ruining it from a competitive experience as well, because it drives the importance of making sure that you're not you played a naked multi-ball, dude. I mean, good luck to you, but it's not going to get you there. Like, I want someone to enjoy that multi-ball experience and then know that, hey, as we're score balancing this multi-ball, nothing's getting in the way. So if this player can kill it, I want to make sure he's out with this range of score, because it's equivalent to if they had a decent single ball load that maybe was interrupted by a multi-ball, but we bring it back. It allows you, it's way easier for me to run through our, and on Pulp, Tim doesn't have this working yet for me, but George would send me the play testers would play all day, and I'd get an Excel spreadsheet the next morning, which was the score log of everyone's ball that was played the previous day, categorized by feature, and all the histograms that rules junkie. Serge, this would be like porn for you. The ability to dissect how often features were happening. What was the average score from the people that were reaching this thing? What was the max and min of what people were getting here? Blah, all that stuff. And all that stuff drives you to hopefully the right answer.
You're going to send me that data for the part 2 of this episode, right?
All right, you got it. It's in my Patreon. If you just want $5 a month.
Well, I'm proud to be able to remove these question marks and put exclamation marks in their stead, as that is where you tend to lean towards. And I think, as you said, it's like all of these things are important, breadth and depth and modes and moments and theme immersion, all that. But in the end, you might need to have a priority of what matters the most. And yours, as you've said very clearly, is going to be moments, storytelling. Everything
Yeah.
else is a sub point to that. And I think if you are the type who want that, who favor that as rules design, then you do want sort of restricted stacking. If your goal is more, I need to give you as much code as possible, as many things to do, the most features, then you might tend to lean towards JJP, and maybe that's a personal preference in the end of what you go for. But I think there's a balance. But I think that if you're all about creating the feeling and of emotions of a pinball moment, you need the restricted stacking. Right. I guess in Pulp Fiction, like you can't bring a mode into a multi-ball or a multi-ball into a mode. You can't bring one multi-ball into the other multi-ball. Those are separated. You can't activate a playfield multiplier in multi-ball either. And it's like you could argue it's like the most restricted stacking of any modern
Yeah, you
game.
pretty
rules.
much you can drive fast and you can royale with cheese. That's about
And
it.
that's about it.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's a sort of a related concept I think about in the subject. This is really all also about clarity. I kind of skipped ahead to focusing on clarity, where players I think do want complexity in the code. They do want breadth and depth, but they just somehow also want clarity. They don't want them to be. You don't just want a simple game, and I don't think this is a simple game. Lighting can help. We showed a little bit of this, touched on this earlier, that in jackpot phases, like the first jackpot is for both multi-balls is red, then yellow, then green, and then in the final super jackpot, or as you'd call them, like super payoff, that's blue. Sorry, that's on a different
I'm a
slide.
Roy G. Biv guy.
Roy G. Biv guy.
That's where it goes. Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me too. And even though there are no pinball callouts in this game we mentioned earlier, David Thiel's work on sound effects trains the player so well. There's like a specific sound for jackpots, for example, so you know exactly when you hit one. The collect phase at the end of the mode has high intensity beat sound, that helps you with knowing what's going on that way. There's one more concept though on clarity I wanted to ask you about. So it's even more abstract than the stacking thing, and that is layering, or what I define as layering. So what I mean there is like layering is like what are the gating of features? In your game, you can collect a character when you're in single ball play, but you don't have to play a mode first before you can collect a character. There's not like a gate to it, And a mode, you could play a mode. You don't have to collect a character first before you play a mode. There's just these features that are sort of a lot of features. Not only can they not stack together, but there's nothing gating one after the next. And I think that you can take this concept too far where it goes like really crazy, where there's a lot to layer, like you collect. I don't know. I don't want to. Should I call it any game? I don't know if I want to call it any game in particular. But what I mean is,
like the one that comes to mind is like the Band-Aid on like Turtles. You can't play any multi-ball until you get through
Perfect.
your certain number of modes, and it's like, was that the design intention? Fuck no, it was not the design intention when they were writing it up. But you have to Band-Aid your way towards wanting to gatekeep because everyone's driving their bus to that restaurant. I want them to go to eat over here too, and yeah, it ends up just breaking everything.
yeah,
And it's like, how am I? And it goes back to the game is on the playfield. Is what ends up really being mostly irritating is that how are my kids supposed to know that they can't start another multi-ball? They just keep shooting the van, and it's like nothing's happening, Dad. Well, as you can see on the display, you now have to do a bunch of these other things before you're allowed to do that again.
right.
I'm
Right.
gonna go play Roblox. Sounds good. Like you've lost the player.
Same thing. Yeah, I get that sort of artificial restriction of layering because you have to account for it is often, like you said, a band-aid. It doesn't actually fix the underlying
I don't mind. I mean, an example of that is like typically like lighting locks in Pat Lawler games would often be, and he would take a lot of shit, even back in the day of like Twilight Zone. You shoot these ramps and then the lock is somewhere else. And it's like, how is a player ever going to have any idea that what they were doing caused this thing way over here to happen? And it's like, Twilight Zone took a lot of shit for that, 30 whatever years ago, 35 years ago. And, it does, through text on the playfield, kind of gets you there. Pulp Fiction Frenzy is a little bit like that. We have our moments too where it's like these target banks advance these letters, and it's like we better have some text on the playfield, or else the ball's flying around and a player's just getting another How do they even know that what they did made that connection? Briefcase, easier. Same shot as you're locking balls. Pawn shop, clear the bank, you're shooting here. Anytime you have like a direct or like an indirect thing happen that
Right.
that makes it hard to connect to how did I advance this thing, that's already hard even when you're not gatekeeping. It becomes impossible when you're gatekeeping a year after a game comes out. That's just good luck.
Right. Like Venom, you can't play Mayhem
Yes.
again until you
Yes.
do a bunch of things.
Yep.
And how do you know what those things are? Does
Yep.
anybody really know?
You ask Ray Day, and he'll
Right.
tell you. Just
Right,
give
right,
out
right,
his cell phone number.
Right. And then some games are like extreme layering, which I think it just has to be handled like tastefully. I think like Elwyn is like one of the best at that. Like there's a lot going on in his games, of course, and like one thing triggers another thing, which triggers another thing. The climb
Yeah,
helps you climb to get the Deadeye skill shot mode, and then the New York City events, and so
Jurassic Park is one of my favorite games ever, but like, how do you light a control room?
right.
Sit down and I'll tell you.
Right, right. You
Like
have to get a raptor jackpot,
it's
or
not great.
right.
It's not
So many
great.
tower shots,
Yeah,
or right.
it's not great.
Spell chaos 2 times. Like who's remembering that? Except us, right, Josh?
That's right. That's right.
So anyway, but this is just to say, skipping ahead, that I was going to talk a little bit about clarity of the game at some point, and over here is when we did that. And I think the game is very clear for the reasons you make out, even though it doesn't have a display, and even though it doesn't have pinball callouts, that way, it finds a way to be clear to the player because it has restricted stacking, it has low levels of like gating, this layering kind of thing, has clear lighting, unique sound effects for jackpots, all that sort of thing helps for clarity, and I think the game is really strong on that. I go back a little bit now to talk, yes, about breadth. And one of the ways I think about like what is there to do in pinball, I give it like it's not mine. I mean, we talk about the 5 M's of modes and multi-balls and multipliers and missions, sort of side quest, and then miscellaneous stuff. So like on the mode side of things, you have these 4 major modes: the twist, and you make them thematically make sense. Like twist contest is shooting the pops, and clean the car, you shoot the spinners, which was otherwise associated with the car from drive fast. Gold watch, there's a gold watch there for the magnet. So I don't know. I don't have much more to add to it, but I know you've worked on like score balancing a lot here. Anything else you want to add to the modes that I missed?
No, I mean it's just I hate all the Williams games from the '90s did that sort of mode integration and storytelling extremely well, and I think we entered this era of colored arrow target practice that like is fine to move arrows around and not make it feel like you're moving arrows inserts around on a pinball playfield. It's hard to not break that fourth wall when you're just shots.
Yep.
Shots.
Like a Stern, like a Stern Star Trek is like all these different modes, but it's really light hit the arrows.
Yeah, my email to the Stern team with my feedback when I went in to play that one did not land well with some people over there for sure.
Okay.
It was I think I gave it the award for the most generic inserts with no text all time in pinball history. And there wasn't a Twippy back then, but
Right.
it would have won the Twippy for that award.
I agree with that award. It had with one of the best layouts, like flowy layout, great feeling, generic.
Why not label all the arrows up the center with like punch it? There's just these yellow arrows with nothing on it.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to understand anything?
You're speaking my language, Josh.
I'll have
I
to pull
agree.
that email up and myself.
And then, so that's modes. By the modes, you shoot the right drop, which at first that lights your outline ball save, which is cool, and then you shoot it again, that same shot to roll the scene. And the scenes are like 40 seconds, but in the last 10 seconds, you can shoot that really hard shot again and reclaim all the similar points you did in the rest that you earned in the rest of the mode. And I love that amping up right at the end of the mode, which is great. like I was just thinking about Stern Star Trek, which is like a great game in many ways, especially the layout. But you have the final shot, and it doesn't matter as much as this final shot, that way. So you really feel amped up as you're going the rest of it. And then 2 main multi-balls here, briefcase boogie, you hit the inline drops, the first multi-ball at least, you hit the first 3 inline drops, you shoot the buck 3 times, opens the briefcase for a big moment, you're in the multi-ball. Pawn shop, you hit the drops a bunch of times, opens the shot, also again 3 times, you're in the multi-ball. One thing I noticed is that there's like a natural progression in these multi-balls of I mentioned it earlier, the first shot is red, then yellow, then green, and they become progressively more valuable up until the blue shot. And then, you're not going to get this the first time you play, but over time you feel the importance of each individual kind of color that way. Anything you'd add to that, Josh, like how you want it to amp up along the way towards Super Jackpot and how you think about like a big moment from a Super Jackpot?
No, I think it's just figuring out the story you want to tell and pacing that story through something that's hopefully achievable for the player, and hopefully the story that you're telling is entertaining. And the shot you have up is the pawn shop super stage, and the intro to that stage, it's a great scene. I mean, the scene wrote the rule. It's awesome. You get to that point in the dialogue where something goes from a problematic situation for our protagonists to not so much of a problem for them as it is for the other people. And when you're able to sort of switch that dynamic, and David and George are able to sort of make you feel that before you enter this stage, mwah,
Yeah.
love it. Ship it. Next. Done.
I have one more. I have one thing that small petition to you for consideration.
It better not be briefcase carryover.
No, it's not that.
Okay.
Although that is true for those watching, that progress in the pawn shop, you could save it. To beat the wizard mode, you need to get a super jackpot or super payoff in both of those multi-balls, among other objectives. And it saves your progress on pawn shop, but it does not save your progress on briefcase. I'm okay with that. I understand why that was done. Presumably, it's on average harder to get the super jackpot, super payoff on the pawn shop. Isn't that fair to say? There's more shots.
Yes and no. It really it's a Lyman discussion that we had when he was playing the game early on, and his philosophy on and we talked a lot about it when we were doing Cactus too, is the rules requirements to reach the end, and making sure that you have what he would call equity-based requirements and skill-based requirements. Equity-based requirements being, if you let someone play this thing 100 times in the same game, eventually they will do enough to get that insert at the bottom. And he's like, as long as you have one thing that you could give this player 100 cracks and there is a chance they don't get it, you will instantly make the depth of your game an order of magnitude better for owners out there who will be chasing this dragon for far longer, of trying to get to that elusive.
I get it. That makes sense. I'm fine with that. That it needs to be a special game where that briefcase might end up being the hardest thing to do of the 5 objectives, maybe.
For sure. It's what the number of pictures on my phone of the right 4 inserts done, and
right over here, or I'll show it in this version, which is, these are the 5 things you need to get done to get to this wizard mode, the divine intervention, and the pawn shop is here, and all the modes to get to the shot, and then cast chaos we'll get into, and Pulp Fiction Frenzy usually happen, but it's this last one that's trickier because there's no progress.
It's the skill test.
It's the skill test. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. No, mine was going to be rather specific, which is that when you're in multi-ball and you have jackpots available, they're often available here and here and here, and they're all lit up and here, but they're also available over here on this shot, right, in the pawn shop. And the way you signal it to the player is with a light over there. But my very specific niche question for you is, why not use the lock shot light to give you that signal?
And it's not a lock, Serge.
All right, fine. I'm just putting, like, you can see it here. See, it's like over here, Thanks, Cale.
I mean, we use it during pawn shop because you are relocking.
You are relocking there, right? All right, there you go. There you have it. All right, petition over. All right, so that's it for the
We'll send you a
multi-balls.
decal patch. You can
I would appreciate
swap
that.
it out.
Yeah. So just a word of note, there is a light for the jackpot. It's like
It's
on
tough
the
to
back.
see.
It's on the
It is tough.
billboard.
Yeah, it's tough.
All right, multipliers here. There you have two big multipliers to talk about. One is the playfield, one is the bonus multiplier system. So to get on the playfield multiplier side of things, which is really helpful to know as we get into strategy too, is you hit this target and this target. You could actually hit them on purpose too sometimes.
Yeah.
You could also nudge it into there on purpose, so it's not totally random. And then after you do that, you shoot this magnet. After you do that, you'll see this red triangle arrow lit, and then you shoot that magnet, and that's your playfield multiplier, which is also, to your point about always having an insert that explains things, it's also there on the backboard here of, like 1x, 2x, 3x, up to 6x if you get
George
them
Gomez,
all.
man. Games on the playfield.
Games on the playfield, absolutely. And so it can only be done in single ball play. We were talking earlier about restricted stacking, so it forces you to strategize. And I think that's like really a nice critical restriction that a lot of other games could benefit from, because for a lot of other games you're just in multi-ball and then you go for the multiplier. And you're not trying
Lyman and I would talk about the competition install on Walking Dead. I remember playing that, and the mode multi-ball stack. We would sit. I would yelling at him that you can't have it's called risk reward, not both. It's not no risk all reward. And having a ball, there's nothing more scary than having a ball trapped on the right flipper of Walking Dead with one drop target left and prison lit. And what do? It's like I can start prison right now and get some points, but in Walking Dead, the way the modes are, it's like, oh, I'm gonna shoot the target and I'm gonna drain and I'm gonna get no mode points and I'm gonna get no multi-ball points because I'm not even gonna start it. That there needs to be the pleasure and the pain for it to really work.
I know this is a talk about Pulp Fiction, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I was always wondering that it's one of the only Stern games, Walking Dead, that by default you can actually start a mode after your multi-ball, unless you're in competition settings.
I mean, his response is like, dude, the game is brutal enough, and so he threw it in there, as an adjustment, which is great. It's all I wanted. It's like, you don't need to make everyone eat like this, and I understand, like, if people are grinding towards multi-balls, that mode start shot, it's really hard to, it's an outside shot and all that stuff, and you end up, he's right, on default settings, like, you miss a lot of content if you gatekeep the modes like that by not allowing that stacking. So again, and you only get there when you play enough to kind of understand that, and he was the magician of that. He knew that better than anyone.
Here. Bonus multipliers, let's talk about that next. Which is completing the 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 lanes, advances your bonus X. And again, as you said, it's all there on the playfield. Here you see your bonus multipliers that it advances right there. The rest of the gun is the actual base bonus that multiplies against it. And this is for like high-level players perhaps the most important one to know, because of all the shots on the game, the most valuable shot, single shot for value, is probably the max bonus collect shot. If I was going to say, like, talk some math here specifically, the base bonus, if you added up all these numbers, is 160k right there. So if you get max bonus, the bonus X goes up to 10 bonus X. If you get in other words, if you go through those lanes 10 times, or 10 sets of those lanes. And then you could also multiply it by the playfield multiplier, which gets up to 6x. So like 10x times 6x times 160k is like 9.6 million on one shot. It's a fun thing to go for. I'll pause. What do you say, Josh?
We actually discovered it, but it is the highest single value shot available outside of a roll scene collect, which actually ended up causing a bug where the first time I had a roll scene collect of over 10 million, it crashed the game. And got into talking with George about how the roll scene collect isn't actually a number, it's an animation, and it's just like, okay, programmer guy, you're saying these things. But 9.6 is the highest shot you can get to, and again, with that risk reward, in order for you to get there, you are passing on drive fast more often than not. And that's a choice, because there will be people that I've heard people argue playing bonus X strat, and I've heard people, fuck that. My spinners, like, go. You don't finish your bonus lanes. Keep both available down there so you can rip spinners and have some huge, cash out. I guess your miles cash out could be over 10 million if you drove enough miles.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was important, and the drive fast rule was Mark's rule in terms of wanting to have something that opened the orbits up physically. And yeah, he came up with the idea about, what about if it's lit? And I was just like, oh, dude, that's fucking great, because it balances again. It creates a debate.
Yep. And we have a cheeky comment from one Tim Sexton Pinball in the chat, which is, what's the deal with guns in this game?
Guess there's Wi-Fi on that airplane.
Right. Now, yeah, exactly. Now they're, I guess this game can't be made for kids or something, because it's an whatever the saying is. I won't get into it. But Tim Sexton, also coder on John Wick Pinball, right? But they've been putting guns on games. Lethal Weapon 3 has another kind of gun right in the center of the artwork here. I don't know if you cared about that while you were making this, but there it is. Okay. The next thing I was going to cover after multipliers is missions or side quest in this game. You actually said before, like, the game doesn't have much in the side quest, but for me, I think, tell me if you could see it this way, is that they're like side quest or missions. I think about the things you're doing in the background of the game. You're not directly focused on typically, I think Cyborg, Multiball, and Iron Maiden. Eventually you get focused on it, but along the course of ball 1, maybe ball 2, you're not even thinking about it as you're, making spinners and ramps and targets and all of it, things like that. So in this game, like, maybe the equivalent is the Pulp Fiction letters, where you're not definitively going for it along the way, but as time goes on, you might realize, hey, I'm pretty close to getting to Pulp Fiction Frenzy. And for those who don't know, you get each letter by getting, like, the entire bank here or this or that down. Anything, I'll pause there. What do you say to that, Josh?
I disagree on your definition, but
give me the disagreement.
Yeah, for me, like, side quests are things that don't support qualifications to finish the game. So
Ooh.
For that would be Royale with Cheese and
drive fast
and drive fast for me. Like Pulp Fiction
Super
Frenzy because Pulp Fiction Frenzy, because a player might choose to not focus on it, doesn't make it a side quest to me. I think someone who focuses on, if you want to clear your drops and you're going towards pawn shop, don't start locking balls until you finish both side banks. That way you can be as efficient as possible at resetting all 3 of those banks to be able to get them again. So it's just really whether it's front of mind or not for the player. Well, so it might be a side quest for you.
I love the delightful insult, and I appreciate it too. What about what about the word missions then? Is that a fair word or no?
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of like a long-term feature that is not upfront as a mode in the game.
I guess, and like a mini wizard modes at some point. I mean, it really depends on how the structure is defined. It's like, I keep things pretty simple. So the mini wizard mode for roll scene is when you've played all the roll scenes. So it's sort of this like direct line to what the end mission is. There's other games where, do one of each of these 3 things and you qualify something, or like Cyborg, do enough spinners and ramps and whatever. And it's like, that's great. And I think part of, and maybe this kind of falls back into, is this part of a HUD on a display where you're kind of getting something? Because I think what supports something being a side quest is it didn't make it on the playfield. And do you feel differently about Cyborg if there's a set of inserts that are, spinners, bumpers, whatever, with, the Cyborg guy and artwork, and that becomes a more, I guess, prominent feature of the game? And it's same rule in the game, but it probably impacts the player differently when, oh my God, this is like right in between the flippers. What is this? It's like, oh, it's the most important part of the game.
Yeah, I'm still perhaps struggling with the right term, but like I just see it as different from modes, which are like more upfront in your face, and you get them, and there's traditionally a mini wizard mode after them. And I think like Lyman for me is like the father of this sort of thing that I'm trying to get at, which is like Last Man Standing and Walking Dead, where people aren't playing generally, for most players aren't playing for let me kill as many walkers as I can. But as you're getting closer to 115, which is a lot, you start thinking maybe I could go for this thing, and then maybe to me like Keith Elwin is like the took it and like ran with it, that concept of whatever the thing is I'm trying to say, the cyborg in Iron Maiden, the soul gem for all your Avengers in Avengers, and it is something you or climbing in King Kong, and it is something like you have to do. It's for the inserts to get to the wizard mode, but it's just like not typically top of mind as your first thing that you're doing. I don't know if I've explained, if I've
No,
kind of
it makes sense. I
thought
think a
it
lot
through.
of, and obviously it becomes way harder the more breadth a game has, which is a positive attribute for a game.
Yep.
It's very hard with breadth to say everything's on top of mind when I plunge the ball.
Right.
I mean, it's impossible.
Right. And then, as you said, after the whatever one would call this, I'd also put, by the way, Cast Chaos in this category too, even though it's a little bit easier to do. But it's like because you might actually be thinking it even on ball one if you're getting in the saucer 4 times, 3 times, you're like getting pretty close. But that's this other sort of background mode feature separate from the direct modes, the scenes that you're playing, that it's like here's another thing you can do in the game. Sort of to me, that's not perhaps as you said, that's quite individualistic. Of it's not top of mind for me. It might be top of mind for other players though. But the more of those features you can have, that different players can be top of mind and other players not, I think benefits the
Yeah, no
longevity of
doubt.
a game.
No doubt.
All right, so last thing to talk about after, so we did talk about the Pulp Fiction Frenzy. There's also the Cast Chaos for getting in the saucer. You get all 5 characters. Neat little homage, as you mentioned earlier, to carry characters from taxis, carry passengers, and then that's its own mini wizard mode. And that basically sums up the kind of 5 things you need to do in the game in order to get to the divine intervention. But as you said, also there's this. We already covered this, so I won't do it again. We talked about miscellaneous stuff that, as you would say, is side quests that you don't actually need to get to the end of the game. One of them is this drive fast thing, you going through the in lane, and I really like that. I don't know, I couldn't think of another game that does that, that has sort of different features depending on whether it's lit or unlit. Did you take inspiration from another game? I can't remember. Is that a new thing?
No, I didn't even make the roll. It was Mark roll.
Oh, that's a
And
Mark
I
roll.
guarantee you, Mark wasn't thinking about any other game. He just wanted to shoot an orbit.
Yeah.
He's like, how do I open up this gate here? All of our shots just go back up to the top. It's such a slog.
Right. So I love that you made a rule together that when you go through, like, let's say this end lane and it's lit, then the spinner lights on a timer, you hit and the gates open, so it could continue going back around, and then you would get extra points if you could continue one-timing it, through the orbit that way, and revving up miles per hour, which is on the screen. And then I think that the thing that people forget sometimes is that there's a little tiny target right here, and after you drive fast, you can collect a decent value from driving fast on that target. Anything I missed there, Josh, that you would add?
Nope. That's it.
And if you get to 146 miles per hour, you get an extra ball. If you collect at 146 or more, then you collect. Cale, do you know why 146 miles per hour?
Yeah,
I believe
I'm betting he does. Come on, Cale.
No, 146. What? No, I don't
What's
get
the
it.
relevance of that number? That was the speed supposedly that Steve Ritchie, Mark Ritchie's brother, was stopped at.
Check your high-speed back glass.
And it's there on the art of high-speed backglass.
Wow. So it's not about time travel.
That's 88 miles per
Oh,
hour.
okay.
And also might be coming soon. So awesome there. And then maybe one other thing to say is when you go through all the lanes and you get your bonus X, which we talked about before, up to 10X bonus, it briefly lights on a timer, a hurry up, on the Royale with cheese target. And as you mentioned, Josh, this is one of the harder things to purposely hit in the game. And so when you do that, it sets you up for a few things. It lights your bonus collect right here. So anytime in that ball, you can collect your bonus on that shot on the watch. It also sets up super spinners, which I think people forget about sometimes, but that's like another ancillary feature there. Anything you'd add to that, Josh, about Royale with cheese stuff?
That rule is probably the one that from a player understanding part, one that I'm not pleased about. I mean, it's sort of like what I was talking about with the Pat Lawler stuff from the 90s is
A
like,
lot of gating.
finish these 4 lanes. Now it lights this thing on the left. Hit that. Now it lights this thing on the right. And it's really hard for someone of a casual nature to like make that connection. So it's definitely a nerd rule, which, I can appreciate as a player, but I can sort of take a step back and look at myself and be like, what the fuck are you doing, you idiot? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. It's probably the least known rule of the game is
I mean, I think it is on the instruction card, but at that point,
you've lost.
as George Gomez would say, the game's on the play field. The instruction
Right.
card is not on the play field.
Right.
I've lost. I've let Mr. Gomez down, and that frustrates me.
So if you want that 9.6 million shot, you have to go through these lanes, hit that stand up, which lights this arrow that you could then get to collect all of this bonus. Right there. That's my little drawing. Cool. Last thing I was going to talk about, that's basically it for the rules, is strategy a bit. I know this game will be at the next Papa, right? Which is in like a month or so. I don't know.
No, 2 weeks. A week from today.
Oh, is that fast?
No,
wow,
2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, so it's coming up really soon. Do you want to give a particular strategy? Do you not want to that you would advocate for?
No, I don't. I mean, we're gonna have the not quite released code yet. That hopefully it definitely juices up the earlier value in the multi-balls compared to what people have been playing now. Outside of that, it's really, I mean, depending on game setup, if you, for some reason, I don't know how Andy Bagwell is going to set it up, but the, posts up, rubbers out, depending on how hard it is, I think this is where, watching people shats in lanes for bonus. And it's like, well, why are you doing that? It's because the game is so fucking insanely hard set up that the tournament director isn't letting me get anywhere on it. So it's sort of is one of those things where you have to be able to have a game that's flexible to how the tournament director sets it up. And if you're taking away these long-term strategies, the short-term strategies become sort of the primary hook. And it's like, the modes have huge value, and you're 2 shots away from starting one. Can't be much less than that from a plunge to be able to get somewhere. And it's like if you start a mode, I think the big thing that Lyman and I talked about all the time, Tim and I talk about it all the time. The best games give you the upside to win by just getting into this thing, and if you perform great, you're gonna win. And it's instead of, well, you really need to make it to this feature to have a chance. It's like, well, why not just make every feature that potential, and then you can get into modes that are sort of upper bound score capped based off of, well, we only allow up to 6 shots to be made, and it's like, why? Well, you end up stacking it with a multi-ball, and it would get too much out of hand if you allowed it to go on forever. One of the pleasures of not having this stacking is, we can treat the scoring to those single ball modes like crank it up. From everything's crank it up, because you're gonna die, or you're gonna make it. There's no bringing in a multi-ball for your salvation to have an easy path through this.
Yeah, and right here is, as you sent me the upcoming kind of code changes in terms of the scoring, and like you said, multi-ball jackpots, especially in the early phases, are getting more juiced to make players go for it, because a lot of players didn't get to the blue super payoff phase, or maybe didn't even realize how valuable it was. But I think probably the biggest change, I think, from a tournament level is the bonus advance, that you removed it from the in-lanes. And that's so that I assume, so that you can't see like Jason Zoller or Eric Stone in particular.
Like 4 people.
Right, it's like a 4 people rule. Like they would go nonstop alley pass all day, just so that it could build up bonus and bonus X and get up to that million point plus shot on the bonus X collect.
Yeah, they could get to 1/6 pretty easy.
Yeah, well here makes sense. So that's your upcoming score balance changes. In terms of the strategy a little bit, I was going to say for consideration. Sorry, not share, but for consideration, I was going to just say like, If you're going a mode strat, I tend to short plunge because if you get in the top saucer, it lights your character collect, drops the target, and then instead of 2 shots for the mode start, it's 3 shots.
We
Is
have
that fair to say?
it's a debate from the very beginning of I do super skill. I don't short. I mean, I guess you can super skill and short plunge, but I will. Yeah, depending on if the path you go is, if I'm going modes, I definitely don't want the ball up at the top for exactly the reason you mentioned. But if I'm going multi balls
Then
and
it's fine.
I can lock balls and get other plunges up to the top that brings in cast chaos, you sort of pick the lane you're going to go. And hopefully, with the multi ball boost, in a perfect world, half the players are arguing why you should just plunge to the top and try to get your first character, maybe some free kahuna action, and talking about that stuff, versus the people that are like, get into a mode as fast as you can and blow it up. And it's like, I want to see Hannity and Combs debating that all day.
Yeah. Right. Older reference, but I like it.
Yeah.
All right. So another point is the multi-ball strategy. So I think we've talked about this, Josh, but that there is, people may not really realize how powerful the multiplier strategy is, and that you can set it up one shot away. So you get the multi-ball one shot away, especially ball 1 and ball 2 when you're far away from, like when you still have play to go. And so you get it one shot away, and then you start focusing on boosting the multiplier before starting the multi-ball. So you get it one shot away, and then you go for the multiplier. That's, like, I think, a good tried and true strat. Anything you'd add there, Josh?
I think part of the multi-ball strategy is realizing that you are far more likely to have a higher end of ball bonus when you play the multi-ball strat, which then brings you into that
bonus
drive
X,
fast or bonus X strat. And it's like, well, I'm kind of committing here, so I'm going to commit to the bonus X strat, because if I'm starting a multi-ball at 2x playfield, I can come out and try to get you can get your Royale with cheese during multi-ball. You can't collect your bonus during multi-ball, but you can prime it so it's ready when you come out. And so it kind of, that main decision you make on where to go, there's kind of a bunch of supporting decisions that it's like your kids that jump in the car with you. It's like, can we come too? We want to go. That it's kind of, you end up pivoting to where the points are available for you.
Yeah, and a question from the chat: if you hold up the left flipper for a super skill shot on the plunge, does it go right into drive fast?
No.
No, because it didn't go through an inlane.
Yeah. A lit inlane.
A lit inlane, right? Well said. Right. And then there's also the mode strat. It used to be clean the car was like far superior than other modes. I think it still is superior, but it's just not as much.
Not on my. I guess we nerfed it by 70%, and my spinners are still. I have a prototype game, so my spinners still are not as good.
Yep.
So it is the shittiest mode in my game.
Yeah. Fair enough. Now, in this game, you can't change your modes sort of too purposefully. It's slings and pops that change the mode. So I did want to ask you about that, which is like, and I'm a chart guy, but I see like a lot of different levels of choosing how one chooses their modes. Like, is it totally random? In like Twilight Zone, if you hit the slot machine, it's totally random, as an example. I would say Pulp Fiction is sort of semi-random, which is that you can do things to change the mode, a sling or pop, but you can't purposefully change the mode to something else. What's your feeling on that, as far as like giving players options? Is this a fair characterization also?
It is.
What if, one more thing? What if I added the graphics of like communism towards America in freedom, and then maybe Switzerland for having like no mode choice because there's no modes?
This falls back to making a game for entertainment purposes and to support a player's experience. And I think player choice is awful. I think it's one of the worst things. And I see it in my kids when I bring a new game home and they play Avengers for the first time. And I think what fails to be recognized is that nobody wants to be made to look like an idiot. And the first question I get from, which mode should I pick? Because I can move it with my flip. Which one don't I want to pick? And you've lost, because you've now made this moment a moment of anxiety at some point of my oldest son, who now plays in tournaments, I don't want to be embarrassed picking Power Gem as my first mode. It's like, somebody tells, it's like,
Right.
pick
Commentators are
reality,
saying,
or if you want to, pick time gem, or if you're going for soul gem and you want to pick mind gem to get, ba, 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 ba. And it's like, yeah, what people fail to realize is how many people don't have ZMAC as their personal coach, and you're just sort of left of like, I have to choose one out of 6 things. I'm gonna pick the wrong thing, and that's not great for a player experience. So I am like, and I think semi-random is a little maybe too harsh. It's like for upper level players on Pulp Fiction, by shooting a sling, you can absolutely toggle it one at a time. That it is a back when Clean the Car was, super overpowered, you could absolutely shoot a sling, get the mode you want, and profit. But for people that are flipping the ball around, my experience with this mode just starts, and that's great. There's no which one would you like. Oh my god, which one would I like? Or worse, my younger kid, you shoot your mode start. Where's the ball? Where's the ball? And then it times out, and a mode starts for you, and he wonders like, did the game break? Dad, I was playing, and then like nothing happened for like 20 seconds.
so Josh Sharpe, confirmed communist. You heard it here.
I'm way closer to that side than the other side.
You get what you get, and you don't get upset.
And funny enough, I think my joke to Tim is like, we in the next game, when it comes out in 5 years, there is a choice, and it drives me crazy, but thematically the choice is, I believe it has to be in there, and it's 5 shots away from being available to make a choice, and I'm just like, I'm like driving head on into what I hate.
Interesting. No, I love to hear that other perspective there. It's fair points entirely. That kind of giving players choice makes them choose a certain thing, and also to avoid the embarrassment of not choosing the wrong thing.
I feel that way as a player. If I get on a game, I feel that way with Transformers right now, where it's like, which mode do I want to play? And it's like, well, if you're going to stack it into multi-ball, play this, single ball. It's like, okay, right. Thanks, because man, if I went up and because you can, choose with your flipper before you make the shot. It's like, could you imagine if Josh Sharpe played this mode naked? Right. What a moron! And it's like, even I have that anxiety of like not wanting to be made to look like a fool.
Well, I do commentary with Cale, for electric bat tournaments, and I have been told that sometimes I'm a jerk in my commentary too. And I could see your point now.
Yeah, it's not helping, man. These people are already afraid enough to play.
Right. Well, here. Okay, so we move on. I was going to ask you about depth. That was the biggest criteria to talk about because we went over all the rules and strategy and so forth. But depth, this is more different than breadth. It's all about the milestones, events that are unlocked after achieving a set of things in the game. And there are 3 mini wizard modes in this game. There's the shot for getting through all the scenes. There's cast chaos for collecting all the characters. There's Pulp Fiction frenzy for the letters, and then that gets you that. And then there's the wizard mode for doing those 3 things, plus getting the super payoffs and the other 2 multi-balls. So how do you think about depth in a game, especially a game that has a short ball time like this?
It's it's why we only have 1 skill requirement, and the rest are equity requirements that people can close their outlane posts and put the game to 10 balls and do whatever they can to try and mostly get there to see the content that they want. But it does certainly how deep the rabbit hole goes for each of those, content. Like briefcase is 10 shots, and everything outside of that that's like equity based is doable by a lot of people. It's really hard to do them all on one game, but I feel like any of those individual requirements are certainly not any deeper than they are because of the physical limitations of the game and that ball time just being, not anywhere near where modern games are.
Interesting. Cale, sorry, it sounded like you were going to add something, or no?
Oh, no.
Okay, never mind. I was going to say that I hadn't thought about it in those terms of like a skill-based gate versus equity-based gates, and having at least 1 skill-based gate is important so that you just don't reward everyone for participation or whatever. But that's a really interesting way to put it. What I like though is that and that sometimes is missing on like classics games is you're not going to get to the wizard mode of the game, but if you can get to some interesting point in the middle of your games, like the cast chaos or the shot, then you feel like you achieved something that you could still grasp, that way. So I love that it has these sort of paced throughout the game. That on a good game you get to one of these mini wizard modes, and that feels like enough for you of an achievement while still holding out something else. Cool. Well, we did. That's really what I was going to say about depth. Is there is depth in this game, and that separates it out from a lot of other classics games or single level games. In terms of clarity, well, here's the Pulp Fiction sort of depth stuff. In terms of clarity, we already covered this earlier, talking about how you. Sorry, well, I was going to maybe show. Yeah, that's it now. I won't bother to show some of the videos, but we talked about the collect phase of a mode, how the lighting really makes it clear that you're in that. Like there's just a lot there in clarity that makes this easy for the player to know. And then the lighting of different jackpots, and we already talked about this, so I won't get into it again. I'll move on to risk and reward, though, which, are there payoffs for executing on a tough strategy in a game? And I think there really very much that's in here. And I know that you said that despite being like a longtime elite tournament player yourself, you're really going for moments. But I also see that that's the risk reward is certainly in here, and you touched on earlier, just there can't be risk without reward. So anything else you'd want to add to this of how you thought about injecting it into this game?
No, it's the foundation of, outside of the storytelling. It's it's what Lyman's dream game, would be Song Jackpot and AC/DC, but a bunch of features that behave the same way. So you're constantly in this, do I continue to build or do I cash? Do I continue to build or do I cash? And that is the epitome of competitive pinball at its finest, which is you can bail anytime, but the reward, it only gets bigger if you press your luck and keep it going. I mean, it's press your luck the game show. It's all these, the further you're willing to push, are you willing to risk losing it all? And I know that, Ray and I have gotten into this. He's joked about it a bunch where, some games, I think on like, Godzilla, your advancement bonus is if you drain as you're building that up, it's less. And it's like, well, if Josh did it, it would be 0. And I'm like, fuck yeah, it'd be 0. You need the pain. And so I sometimes think people don't go enough because it's like, man, but then you're going to feel so bad if you miss it. It's like, yeah, that's the exact feeling you want out of that moment where like, hey, man, I didn't make the person keep going. That was their choice. I'm taking all their food away from them. That's on them. They could cash out at any time. Not my problem. Sorry they feel bad that they missed out on everything.
Yeah, I think like in this game, even to be specific, there's very commonly a scenario where I see I'm one shot away from the playfield multiplier shot. It's lit at the watch, but do I go for that or do I start my multi-all? Do I do the mode because like I don't want to risk it? So you feel because it's a dangerous shot with the dangerous feedback.
The biggest feedback I got from like the elite player group was like, why can't I do the Kahuna advancement in multi-ball? It's like not a story-based rule, and,
Right.
and I'm like, because you want that, because it takes away the risk of going for that. Because in multi-ball, it's like all the balls get auto plunge to the top. You're hitting those targets no problem. It would just make the game so much worse to have that available for free.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be worth the reward. It is because there would be no risk.
When I'm playing Mandalorian, you get in the multi-ball, and then you hit the stand-ups on the right to increase your playfield multiplier. You would never think to do that before you get into multi-ball. Why would you? But it's the first thing. Every time I play multi-ball, I'm just going to hit those stand-ups right away before anything else.
Use your free time and make everything that you're about to do more valuable. And it's like, yeah, what if you had to do it beforehand? Well, now I'm sweating, and I don't like you very much. I didn't want this moment. And it's like, that's what you want. You want ball on flipper, and you want, I'm going to fuck it all up. And it's like, you might.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know if I want to like say that it's 100% always the right choice. It might be, but like I definitely agree with you that it seems like the right choice. It seems like the right choice to like not to for specifically.
And not because I'm a masochist. I enjoy the pain, but I truly think the pleasure you get when you pull it off is heightened so much when you have felt what it's like to not consummate that moment.
Right. So start playfield multipliers only before multi-balls. I agree with that. That seems like the right choice. Um, and then there's all sorts of other risk and reward in this game. There's the collect your value on the shot with 10 seconds left. It's hard to do, but it's hugely valuable if you could get into it. It might be the reason you're going into modes as a strategy to begin with, so you know there's a risk there to even getting in the mode, but then collecting on the mode and all of that. And then the multi-ball is the further you are into it, the more reward you get. Just all of that, and I know you're changing some of those numbers, but all of that goes into the risk-reward side of things. So, kudos there. I think that game definitely has it that way. Cool. We go on to fair and balanced. And this category means a few things to me, at least. Like, does one player's choices ruin another player's chances? That's on the fair side of things. There's nothing like that in here, of course. But, like, if you pick Godfather characters and somebody else can't pick them, you get the idea, right? But balanced is also, like, is the scoring so lopsided that it makes you ignore or even time out modes? And obviously that's not true in this case here. At least with, you could argue some people with the wallet mode or whatever maybe consider it because it's so dangerous. But the whole point of modes is you build up a lot of value so that you could get them in the collect phase. And generally, you're worried the mode's going to end too soon. It's sort of the opposite problem. Like, you feel like you have to get a lot done right away. So I'll pause there. Anything how you think about like the score balancing in this? And I know we already touched on sort of this chart that you're working on for the next release.
No, you nailed it. It's really like, and it's why the scoring, for the modes, whatever the base value of the mode is, the next shot increases by that amount. So the next shot is always juicier than the one before it. So it's like, if you have your wallet up and you have 13 seconds left, and it's like, do I just shats to hit a switch to kill 3 more seconds, or do I like make one more shot? What could go wrong if I shoot that magnet one more time? And that's what I want to ask of the player is, do you want to push it for that one more shot? And then the magnet, rifles it down the left out lane, and you go punch your playfield glass, and I smile.
Yeah, and another thing I think about in balancing is, does the rules designer make you use the whole playfield?
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely true in this case. And it's more than just true, it's like super true. What I mean is, all the shots matter. You're going to hit this shot and that shot, and you're going to hit all the shots. But you even make every stand-up matter. And not just in a way where it's like, hit all the stand-ups to do something. Every individual stand-up has a deep rule thought about it. Like, the Royale with cheese, that target is the thing that lights your gun bonus, or this stand-up is for carry passengers, and that one activates your 2x playfield, and on and on. So the point is that, like, you make these things things matter
like
individually.
I owe that to Mark. It's my job to make sure that he took the time to design where every target is and where every shot is, and if I don't give those areas an attention that they deserve, I'm disrespecting him as the designer of not pulling out the best I can from his work. So I owe it to him.
I love that. I mean, I not to call it Mandalorian again, but it's like, if if you tie the easiest shot in the game, which is like up the middle, to also the most common shot you're going to want to hit because of the modes, it just it sort of disrespects the rest of the playfield, I feel like.
But don't worry, we can just not allow you to do center all day by making you do something else
artificial
randomly
restrictions
after the game comes out that nobody knows about.
Right. Here. And then, of course, like for balanced, you don't want the game to reward you for doing nothing. You don't want to plunge into a multi-ball, and that's certainly not the case here. Do you think about like how far away to put features? Because there's often a tension between, and George Gomez would say this, is like, you want the player to get something right away, the bozo multi-ball, let's say, for hitting some shot of like 3 times, right, little Deadpool or something, versus something that's like more shots than that. I don't know. How do you think about that? Not too soon, not too late.
No, I think that's where, how much breadth of content do you have to support a diverse number of entry points? And obviously, the bigger the breadth, the more places you can throw a lower valued feature closer to the start button, but also make sure like, oh, I got some stuff back here too that will be far juicier, but it's 12 shots away. It's not lit at ball start.
Cool. Well, that covers it for the balancing in this game, and I think that's like very score balanced. You could see that like it's been 3 years since this game was first sent out, and you're still coming up with code updates for score balancing, which kind of is a
To be fair,
testament.
that code update's like 18 months old. We just haven't released it. But, yeah.
Well, then you haven't done it, so never mind. So credit taken away.
Do we know when it's coming out, or do you know?
I think we are trying to make sure that Scorbit integration is locked and loaded and no problems before we do it. I joke with George that I think he is from the era where you shipped 1.0 and you were done.
You're done.
And if you had 1.01 happen on your game and everyone had to send ROM chips to the operators, you were like a moron. What's the matter with you as a programmer? You couldn't get it right? So I do feel like, I mean, this is 103. Like, I feel like if he released this and then did 104 with the Scorbit stuff, that, like, I don't think he understands that modern pinball is update. I mean, all my Stern games update weekly with the stuff that they keep adding, that it's really not an issue that he's should be worried about, but I think he sees it as like a scarlet letter in a way that, like, I'm not going to convince him that it doesn't matter anymore, because he's like, all my friends at Williams dinner are going to make fun of me because I'm at 1.04. Like, there's George, that 4 guy, took him 4 times to get it right.
Right. I think one trivia fact, I think that the longest time since when a game comes out to when a designer, a rules designer, the software programmer, is going to be Lyman for Iron Man rather, 10 years later. And I don't mean like modified ROMs that come out from somebody else. I mean from the original rules designer. I have to believe that's got to be the record. Anything else? I don't know. You're steeped in this, Josh. Anything else beat that?
Thank the Vault program for that.
Right.
No, I mean, I think Cactus. It was like
that's an interesting
30
point.
years between rules updates.
Right. Yeah, I guess fair. That's the real. I don't know why I didn't mention that one. I guess, and it's an entire new rules, but I think it's just testament to what Lyman, how committed he is to making this a game that's enjoyed even from all levels will play that way.
For sure.
All right, Josh, we're almost done. I promise. Okay.
Man.
You're still live?
I am. I'm seeing the emails come through. I'm seeing the phone ring.
All right, I'll get through it quickly then. But what I'll say is,
everybody knows what you're doing.
Yeah.
By the way, I've never told once.
You want fucking YouTube right now? No, Eugene, no.
I know, and we do it live. I know, so I think about that too sometimes for me. But you know, it's funny. I never tell anyone who comes on the show like what to expect of how long it's going to be. I assume they somehow know. That's in their heart.
I knew what I was getting into.
Okay, good.
It's why when you said between 1 and 5, it's like the earlier the better with you crazy assholes. Like, holy shit.
I like to talk. Innovation. So doing something new with rules that we haven't seen before. I've seen a few things here. One is like the end lanes, making it matter whether lit or unlit. And I know you said it's more of a Mark thing. It has the most breadth, I mentioned earlier, of any single level game. That's unique. It's the only modern single level game, I think, without a screen compared to, let's say, Bond 60th or TNA. That's like a retro innovation award. The no pinball callouts is huge to me too. Like, that's something quite unique that we covered. And then there's like maximum stacking and layering restrictions. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that how much you put on the alphanumerics for what it's worth. Like, I know a lot of people aren't looking up there, but you put a lot of information there. And just to like show some of it, when you get a danger, it says be cool. You know, when you hit those spinners, it tells you how fast you went in drive fast, you know, on the screen right there. And when you roll it, and this has been done in other games before, but when you roll it, it gives you like the singles digit tells you that that's how many points you actually have over here, if that makes sense. So I don't know, tell me, did you feel like, especially at that last point about alphanumerics and what you could show on it, it seems like there was a lot of thought. There's about 20 things I'm not mentioning here, including like the mode value that you get while you're in the mode, or the jackpots. It actually tells you that information. How important was all of that?
I think a lot of it was, you know, I could speak to, it shouldn't impact your playing experience, but I mean, they call the term display effects. And I think display effects used to support the entertainment is it's worth using. It's an asset to the machine to use it. I just don't, outside of not believing it's necessary to understand what you're doing on the playfield, like, I'm all for it heightening the game experience. And I think even what Joe, I remember when George, you know, when we were doing the modes, and he the idea, he calls it the score slide, where he came up with this thing of like if you're player 1, you know, player 2 is your sort of mode status, and then when it's done and you get your points, it slides over. And just the elegance of which, he came up with that idea of using the display to help show your status if you choose to look or not, but how the points get awarded. It's not just your score isn't just going up. There's a way of him telling you like you earned this, and you can see it adding to your score right now if you want, or the people that are watching.
I think that's my favorite part of the alphanumeric display. The one I look at the most is it telling you, here's your score over here, let's say, but here is the mode value that you're at, or the jackpot you just collected. So just when you have to hit that collect shot, that on the timer at the end of the scene, and you know how much it's worth, that just means a lot more.
I can remember the comment about explaining to George how like if you tilt in a mode, like you get those points you earn, and it's like, right. Oh, okay, all right.
Right. So there's just, even despite it being this sort of single level layout without a display, there's just a lot of innovation here behind it, and kudos there.
One other part about the making a retro game. I never hear anybody talk about this when it comes to Pulp Fiction. And it has to do with the sound. And I'm not talking about the S-tier sound design by David Thiel, but Pulp Fiction was released in the 90s and it was based in the 90s. But when you watch it, you don't get that feel because Quentin banks on the 1950s diner vibe mixed with a 70s grindhouse vibe. But it's in the 90s because the wolf pulls up in an Acura NSX, which is the weirdest thing. So the coolest thing about this, and it's very cool for two reasons. This game, it was released in 2023?
Yeah, I think it was part of that March 2023 Texas Bonanza.
It has mono sound, which is a throwback to the Williams games, but also the theme immersion of that. Because like in this, the gangsters are driving 70s cars. Base model 70s cars had one speaker in the dash. And this is something about theme immersion and innovation that's never talked about with this game.
I do think it's, will we make another game like this? Like, I don't think so. I don't think so, because it really, like, there's 100 bad versions of a game that's made with this aesthetic, and I really do think, sort of thanks to Quentin for putting the handcuffs on us, because he wanted Captain Fantastic. That's the game he wanted.
Oh wow!
And
wow.
For us to be able
to
make a game based on the pinball that he wanted. I mean, the whole project started as a pinball for his house, and for us to be able to kind of give him the aesthetic he wanted by being able to play in the sandbox that we wanted, I don't think you can sort of just make that happen over and over again. I think it was a lot of the theme being most of it, that it really kind of, it works the way the movie works, and it's really not many movies that are like Pulp Fiction, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I hope that with that relationship you have with Tarantino, that you could explore other of his films, for it. Obviously Kill Bill, but there's a lot of other ones in there too.
He's a joy to work with, for sure. As soon as we get his custom callouts, we'll circle back to more properties for him.
Cool. Okay. So that's what I want to say about innovation. I have seen like the little individual digit that tells you if you've rolled a game. They were doing that on I often mispronounce the Zaccaria games. Zaccaria? How do you say it?
But I call it Zachariah.
Zachariah, even different, right? Those games like Farfalla and all of that, and Time Machine, they had the same thing with the 7 digits, which is cool. But a lot of other manufacturers didn't do it for whatever reason. Okay, second to last thing is pacing. This is like the Elwin Award, of like that feeling of I was so close to something. So I think about it in two terms. I think about it in terms of the scoring and in terms of like events. So for me, like scoring, and I'm curious what your opinion here is, Josh. Like I think scoring should almost always be exponential, where on average, the longer your game goes, the more it accelerates the value there, as opposed to like wood chopping or maybe jail, where like there's a period where you just have to get through things to get to more things. Do you think about it that way? Should you think about it that way? Is there room for everything?
I think about it I will usually talk about it as snowball rolling down a hill, gathering more snow as
Yep.
you go. And yeah, I mean, in Pulp, the longer you play, the more likely you are to kahuna your way to the potential for scoring more things. And the wood chopping scenario, the one of the perks to not stacking is you don't find yourself coming out of a multi-ball with a mode you finished in the multi-ball, and now I am as far away as I can be from that multi-ball I played, and I'm as far away as I can be from starting another mode. So you're hoping that there is enough breadth of content to be closer to something else, but in an open world of all stacking, you might have picked off one or two other features during that multi-ball that you brought in, and you end up right where that wood chopping line starts, where, yeah, maybe you just played a bunch of things, didn't understand what was going on, but flipped away to some big points. But from a pacing side of things, you're in jail because you're at the start of a bunch of these features. So it's an unintended slash intended consequence to the no stacking is you for us, you go into a multi-ball, you come back out, and you're still in the mode that you started before the multi-ball. You're not done with it yet. You're right back in it. And anything else that you've made progress on, you pick up right where that progress was at all times. So you're always as close as you were to the next closest thing because we didn't allow you to get anywhere for free.
Yeah, one credit I'll give to Ray Day here is that in his games, a lot of his games, even if you start a multi-ball by itself, you can advance other features while you're in it. Like in Star Wars, if you're in a multi-ball and you don't bring a mode in, you can get the force targets to have your mode lit when you come out of multi-ball. Or in Rush, if you start a multi-ball without the mode lit, you can get records, to build up the value of your modes later on. So at least he makes it like not totally jail, you know. But your way of just restricting stacking also does that. It just gives you like, and as you said, it makes a snowball effect of big kahuna worth more as you go along and you're playing a long ball. But even other things like if you collect a mode, then it adds to the value of future mode collects, right?
Yep.
So all that's like the snowball effect, I think. So it sounds like we're in agreement. This is the good way to do it, right? This
I hope
exponential
so.
stacking.
I hope so.
Right.
It's the way that I prefer to do it, and I certainly know I know a ton of people who are not thrilled about the lack of stacking, and I, as Lyman would say, if you want to, and I mean he used to say this to me when I was just like a punk ass kid telling him, all my great thoughts that I had, and it's like you want to do that, make a fucking game,
Yeah.
and so that's really it, and he was right. It's like if you want to do it your way, you got to make a game to do it your way. Don't yell at me because he would have the reasons why he would do something a certain way, and it's like we can agree to disagree, but he's right because it's his game.
Yeah. Yeah, these games are more like executing on one single strategy perfectly, and then you're sort of in jail after that. And some people might even be into that. I don't know what's wrong with those people, but I think they might exist. Um, the other way is game events. It's just like, are you close to something at different times, or you're just not, like some feature. And I think in Pulp Fiction, like I'm not paying attention necessarily to the cast chaos, but then I'm coming out of a mode or a multi-ball, and I notice that I've already done 3 characters or something. Maybe I'm close, or I see I almost spelled Pulp Fiction Frenzy, so I'm close to that event. So you still feel like the events are kind of close, even if they're not, if you can't stack them together, that they're just paced at a way that you're likely to experience them once you're at 15 minutes of play or 20 minutes of play and all of that. So I think that's all there in this. And it sounds like you do think about pacing, and you said this
All
earlier,
the
of just
time.
all the time,
All the
pacing
time.
being one of the most important
Yeah,
ones to you.
that weak pacing picture. It's like that middle area between the post-it notes
Yeah.
is boring.
Yeah.
Who wants to be in that zone? You can't have it's boring as shit.
Here, here. Well, we wrap up with anticlimactically talking about bugs, which is like, is there anything game breaking? Generally, there's nothing game breaking in Pulp Fiction. It's why it's reliably used in tournaments. But I still like to mention it nonetheless as an important criteria because that feature is not universally true of all new pinball games from other manufacturers. And Cale and Rachel will well know that there are other games that they won't put in the bat because they break too much. Not the mechanics necessarily, but just the code freezing up. I don't know. Anything you'd add, Cale?
Oh, this is Yeah, this is S tier when it comes to reliability on the street. Have zero complaints.
Right, there's one scenario I'll call out, which is that if the mode is just ends and somehow the
yeah.
ball gets stuck behind the drop target right as the mode ends, you know what I'm talking about, Josh.
I do.
But that's pinball, right?
No, it's not great. I actually I can't believe nobody has played Pulp Fiction more than I have, and I
never had it
never
happen.
happened to me. Yeah, I've missed that shot a bunch, but I've never made the shot. But somehow at that split second when the mode ends and the ball is bouncing around and not settling, it never happened. And
So
then
that's
yeah,
that.
the ball it just George has no idea where the ball is in that situation. He couldn't believe it. He's just like yeah. It's like
Got him.
it doesn't know that the ball is missing, but it won't induce a ball search because the ball's on the switch. So it's like the system knows that there's a ball there, but the code does not know to lower the drop and kick it out.
One thing that Spooky did, which was interesting, is they have a thing where if you hold the action button for so many seconds, it triggers a ball search on purpose.
What's an
I know
action
this.
button?
I know that exactly, and I know there's no
Yeah,
action
yeah.
button on Pulp Fiction. I get that. I'm just saying, but what about a flipper code or something? No, that wouldn't make sense either.
No, how about
'Cause-
just fix your fucking bug?
yeah, that's right. All right, fine. One other thing is, tell me if you agree with this. That when it's not a bug. It's not like a game breaking or at all. After a player drains in a multi-ball game, it takes a long time for like the bonus to count and trigger and
We've
the
heard
next player
that.
to come. You've heard that before? All right, I won't say it.
Sometimes you gotta let David Thiel cook, man.
Okay.
He has ideas and he's winding you down, and I'm not gonna tell him otherwise.
All right, deal.
Let him cook.
Let him cook. But like I said, this game is super
It's
reliable.
hard, certainly on location, when you are not able to hear the music as well. It is very hard to know when that transition point and end point is because of his riffing and George's light show to support. It's like, are you done? Not done yet. Not done yet. Not done yet. And it's like the sounds help you kind of know that you're winding down, but without the sound, it's just like, yeah, it seems like you keep getting up, and it's like there's another post-credit scene,
Right.
another post-credit. Can we
But
go? They didn't turn the lights on in the theater yet. Now they did,
Right.
but there's another post-credit scene actually after they turn the lights on this one.
I did used to say this was the record for that post credit scene, but I would say Beetlejuice actually has the new record.
I have not seen it.
What it does, and it's really fun and clever, but it's a long time, and you could speed it along, but it shows you all the switches, the history of switches that you hit on the playfield. It lights them all up as it goes along, like a highlight reel,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Fun.
It's sort of a clever idea, but takes a long time and a long ball,
Yeah.
of course. But anyway, Josh, you have suffered through all of this long podcast. You've done it. We've covered all the 10 things. Have I proven that this game has great code? You can't answer that, Josh.
I
Cale?
can't.
Oh yeah, man. You signed, sealed, and delivered.
All right, it's really some of the best rules out there. It's why this is so beloved, why it's in the highest ranking single level game of all time, and likely to be so for a long time, I bet. Anything else you want to add, Josh? Would you ever come on again
Sure.
for the next game?
Yeah, we'll get. If you guys are still doing this in 5 years,
I know there are a lot of people who
Count
flame
me
out of pinball podcasting,
Or
but
you can
we're still here.
have Timmy and I on together 5 years from now. And
Would
Tim
love
can
that.
talk about my conversion of him into 90s Williams rules being the epitome of pinball greatness.
Well, one thing that's true about both of you is you're both willing to give like hot takes of how you feel.
Yeah,
about
we don't
pinball.
give a shit. Yeah,
You guys don't
I
hold
mean,
back.
unfortunately, it gets us in trouble a lot. I haven't been in the new Stern building yet. And when did they move in? A very long time ago.
Understood. But it's appreciated from the community that likes to hear authentic opinions. That way.
How I roll, man.
Cool. Cale, that's all I got.
All right. Well, we have this bumper music going right now, and thank you all for joining us. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us in the chat. Keep an eye out on Electric Bat social media for our next Pinpals episode, and we will see you guys next time.